A new Flash, a new Barry Allen. Hello everyone, Omni-sensei here with What If I Was Reborn as Insanely Overpowered Flash, Part 3. If you enjoy this content, please smash the like button. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description. I hope you enjoy listening to it.
Barry's smile faded as he took a steadying breath, the weight of what he was about to do settling heavily on his shoulders. He moved to a nearby table, carefully placing the Philosopher's Stone on a cushioned pedestal he'd set up earlier. Its glow intensified as it connected with the room's energy, pulsating faintly like a living thing. Cisco took a step closer, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. So, Barry, what's the protocol here? Is this like a stand still and hope for the best situation, or are we supposed to chant some ancient spell? Barry chuckled softly, shaking his head. Nothing like that, he said, glancing back at Cisco. The stone works by amplifying and unlocking latent potential. I'll direct its energy, but it'll resonate with you. Your desires, your will, your core. The process might feel intense. Define intense, Cisco muttered, casting a wary glance at the glowing artifact. Caitlin stood a few steps behind him, her hands gripping the edge of the lab bench for support. Her analytical mind wrestled with the scientific impossibilities of what Barry was describing, but her heart was captivated by the idea. Barry, she said softly, her voice breaking the tension. If this goes wrong, what happens to us? Barry turned to her, his expression serious but reassuring. It won't go wrong, he said firmly. The stone doesn't force anything. It simply reveals what's already there. You both have the potential, it's been suppressed, but it's still a part of you. This will just set it free. Caitlin nodded slowly, her lips pressing into a thin line. All right, she said quietly, stepping forward to stand beside Cisco. Let's do this. Cisco glanced at her, his brows raised. You sure about this, Frosty? No turning back after this point. Caitlin shot him a look, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of her mouth despite her nerves. You're seriously calling me Frosty now? Really? Cisco grinned. Gotta keep it light, Kate. You know, for morale. Barry cleared his throat, pulling their attention back to the moment. Okay, you two. Stand here, he said, gesturing to a marked area in the center of the room. As they moved into position, he approached the stone, holding his hands over it. The glow of the Philosopher's Stone intensified, casting a golden hue over the room. Barry closed his eyes, focusing his energy on channeling the artifact's power. The air grew thick, buzzing with an electric charge that raised the hairs on their arms. Ready? Barry asked, opening his eyes to look at them one last time. Cisco and Caitlin exchanged a glance before nodding in unison. Ready, Cisco said, his voice steady. Barry nodded, lowering his hands closer to the stone. It responded instantly, releasing a surge of energy that rippled outward in waves. The golden light enveloped Cisco and Caitlin, wrapping around them like a cocoon. The room trembled slightly as the energy surged, the hum growing louder. The glow of the Philosopher's Stone intensified, enveloping Cisco and Caitlin in a radiant cocoon of golden energy. The air trembled as power surged, and the light seemed to pierce deep into their very beings. Caitlin gasped as a chilling sensation overtook her, the warmth in her veins turning to ice. Her body stiffened, her thoughts clouding with something cold, sharp, and entirely foreign. A sudden burst of icy mist erupted from Caitlin's hands, and she staggered back, her eyes snapping open. But they were no longer the warm, familiar hazel everyone knew, they glowed an unnatural, piercing blue. Her lips curled into a smirk that was far colder than anything she'd ever worn before. Well, isn't this a refreshing change, she said, her voice dripping with icy confidence and venom. The soft, hesitant tones of Caitlin's snow were gone, replaced by a razor-edged demeanor that sent chills through the room. Barry stepped forward cautiously, his brow furrowing. Caitlin? Are you? She cut him off with a laugh, cold, mirthless, and sharp. "Caitlin," she repeated mockingly, her smirk growing. "Sorry, Barry. She's not here anymore. You can call me Killer Frost now." Cisco, still glowing faintly with energy from his transformation, turned to her with wide eyes. Kate? I mean, Frosty? I mean, what just happened?" Killer Frost shot him a sidelong glance, the mist swirling around her fingers intensifying. "Oh, relax, Cisco. You've got your little portals, and I've got something much cooler." She lifted her hand, and an icy shard materialized between her fingers. With a flick of her wrist, it shot across the room, embedding itself in the far wall with a loud crack. Barry stepped between her and Cisco, his tone firm but gentle. "Frost, this isn't you. You can fight this. The stone's power is amplifying your potential, but it doesn't have to define you." Killer Frost's smirk faltered for a moment, and her glowing blue eyes flickered with something unspoken. But just as quickly, her expression hardened. "Oh, Barry," she said with mock sweetness, "you're adorable when you think you can fix everything. But let me tell you a little secret." She stepped closer, the temperature in the room dropping with each step. "I like who I've become." Cisco took a hesitant step forward, his usual sarcasm replaced with genuine concern. He raised his hands cautiously, as if trying to placate a wild animal. "Frost, come on," he said softly, his voice steady but pleading. "This isn't you. We've been through too much for you to turn into this." Killer Frost tilted her head, an icy mist swirling around her fingers. Her piercing blue eyes narrowed as she regarded Cisco, a cold smile playing on her lips. "Oh, Cisco," she said with mock pity, her voice as sharp as an icicle. "Still clinging to the past? Newsflash, I'm not Caitlin anymore." Caitlin was weak. She hesitated. "I don't." Iris stepped into the room, her heels clicking sharply against the lab floor. She stopped a few feet behind Barry, her expression a mix of determination and disbelief. "Frost, listen to yourself," she said firmly, her voice carrying a weight that demanded attention. "This isn't who you are. You're part of this team. Your family. Don't let this power turn you into someone we can't reach." For a moment, Killer Frost's smile wavered, her sharp facade cracking ever so slightly. Her eyes flickered, a hint of conflict dancing within their icy glow. But she quickly shook her head, the mist around her growing thicker. "Family?" she spat, her tone bitter. "Caitlin cared about family. I care about power. You're wasting your breath." Barry stepped forward, his jaw tight and his hands raised in a gesture of peace. His voice was calm, but there was an undercurrent of frustration. "Frost, you've fought this before. You know this isn't who you are. Deep down, Caitlin's still in there. She wouldn't let you hurt the people she loves." Killer Frost's eyes narrowed dangerously, her smirk replaced with a cold sneer. "Stop saying her name," she snapped, the temperature in the room plummeting as her anger flared. Frosted patterns crawled up the walls, and the lights flickered under the strain of her power. "She's gone, Barry. I'm in charge now." Barry sighed deeply, the weight of the moment pressing heavily on him. He glanced at Cisco and Iris, their anxious faces reflecting his own growing despair. "I didn't want to do this," he murmured, almost to himself. Before anyone could respond, the world around them slowed to a halt. The hum of the lab faded into a heavy silence as time itself came to a standstill. Frost's sneer froze in place, her icy mist suspended in midair like frozen smoke. Barry straightened, his movements unhurried as he stepped toward her. His expression was a mix of sadness and resolve. Standing directly in front of her, he reached out and gently tapped her on the forehead with 2 fingers. A faint golden glow radiated from the contact, and his eyes softened as he activated his telepathy. "I'm sorry, Frost," he whispered. "But you need to see the truth." Inside Frost's mind, a whirlwind of memories surged forth, vivid and raw. Frost saw herself, no, Caitlin. Working tirelessly in the Star Labs med bay, her face lit with determination as she patched up Barry after a rough fight. She saw herself standing alongside Cisco, Iris, and Barry, trading banter and laughter during their quiet moments. Then the memories shifted. She was Killer Frost again, but not the cold, unfeeling version she now embodied. This Frost was smiling, her blue eyes soft as she handed a cup of hot cocoa to Caitlin. "You're not so bad for a scientist," she quipped, her tone playful. Another memory flashed, Frost battling alongside Team Flash, her icy powers saving Barry from certain death. "We're stronger together," she had said, her voice resolute. The montage ended with a single, powerful memory, Caitlin and Frost, standing face to face in a dreamlike void. "We're two sides of the same coin," Caitlin had said, her voice filled with compassion. "We don't have to fight. We can be whole. Together." In the present, Frost's glowing blue eyes dimmed, and her body relaxed. The mist around her dissipated as time resumed its natural flow. She blinked rapidly, her expression one of confusion and dawning realization. Barry stepped back, watching her closely. "Frost?" he asked cautiously. Killer Frost staggered slightly, her hand instinctively reaching for her temple as though trying to steady her spinning thoughts. Her glowing blue eyes dimmed completely, revealing a familiar human warmth beneath the cold facade. She blinked rapidly, her breath shallow, the icy mist around her dissipating into faint wisps. Her gaze darted around the room, landing on Barry, Cisco, and Iris in quick succession. "What was that?" she asked, her voice trembling with confusion but laced with an edge of her usual sharpness. Her fingers twitched as if trying to summon her power, but nothing came. Barry took a cautious step forward, his movements measured and deliberate. His face was calm but tinged with sympathy, his eyes softening as he met Frost's unsettled gaze. "That," he began, his voice steady, "was a glimpse of what's to come. A future where you and Caitlin become more than just two halves fighting for control." Frost's lips parted as if to argue, but no words came. Instead, her shoulders sagged ever so slightly, the weight of the vision bearing down on her. Her piercing eyes searched Barry's face for answers, but the warmth in his expression only deepened her turmoil. "Future events," she repeated slowly, her tone skeptical yet shaken. Her fists clenched at her sides, though there was no malice in her posture now, only uncertainty. "Yes." Barry kept his hands raised slightly, a gesture meant to reassure Frost as her icy demeanor began to melt, both figuratively and literally. "Those were glimpses of the future," he said gently, his voice steady but carrying the weight of conviction. "You and Caitlin, together, you'll become a force stronger than either of you alone. You'll be a great asset to the team, Frost. To our family." Frost's icy blue eyes flickered, the glow fading like the last embers of a dying flame. Her sharp features softened as her gaze darted toward the floor. The tension in her jaw slackened, and her hands unclenched, dropping to her sides. The frosted patterns on the walls began to recede, the temperature in the room rising noticeably. She tilted her head slightly, a frown creasing her brow. "You think I'll help you? That I'll become a hero?" Her voice, though still edged with her trademark sarcasm, held a vulnerability that hadn't been there before. She looked up, her gaze locking with Barry's, searching for any trace of deceit. Barry nodded, stepping closer, his movements deliberate and unthreatening. "You've already helped us," he said softly, his eyes unwavering. "You've saved us before, Frost. This power you think separates you from Caitlin? It doesn't have to. You can control it. You can be part of something bigger." As he spoke, the change began. Killer Frost's icy white hair started to darken, the silvery strands bleeding back into Caitlin's natural chestnut hue. Her sharp, angular features softened, the icy sheen of her skin giving way to a warmer, more human complexion. Her body trembled as if caught between two forces, her arms wrapping around herself instinctively. Cisco took a cautious step forward, his eyes wide with relief and curiosity. "Frost?" he asked, his voice tentative, almost afraid to hope. His hands hovered as if he wanted to reach out but wasn't sure if he should. Iris moved closer too, her face a blend of determination and compassion. "You can do this," she encouraged, her tone steady. "We believe in you." Frost, now visibly Caitlin, let out a shuddering breath, her shoulders trembling as the transformation completed. Her icy blue eyes shifted to Caitlin's warm brown ones, and the tension in her posture eased. She blinked several times, her expression a mixture of confusion, fear, and relief. Caitlin raised a hand to her face, brushing her fingers across her cheek as if to confirm what had just happened. Her breathing was ragged, her voice unsteady as she spoke. I'm me again," she whispered, her tone laced with disbelief. Barry reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the sleek, compact mental activity dampener, MAD, device, its small lights blinking faintly. He approached Caitlin with calm, measured steps, extending the device toward her. His movements were deliberate, his expression gentle yet firm, like someone offering a lifeline to a friend in turmoil. "This," Barry began, his voice soft but carrying a note of reassurance, "will help you. It'll let you and Frost communicate directly. You'll be able to understand each other and work through this together." He paused, his eyes locking onto hers with an earnest intensity. "You're not alone in this, Caitlin. Neither of you is." Caitlin hesitated, her gaze flickering between Barry and the MAD device. Her hands trembled as she slowly reached out, her fingers brushing against the device with a mix of apprehension and curiosity. She swallowed hard, her throat bobbing as her emotions played out in the subtle tension of her jaw and the faint quiver of her lips. "Barry," she started, her voice barely above a whisper. She glanced down at the device in her hands, its smooth surface reflecting the room's softened light. What if she doesn't want to talk? What if this just makes things worse? Barry shook his head gently, his expression unwavering. "She will," he said with quiet certainty. "She's a part of you, Caitlin. She's just as scared as you are. But you're stronger than you think, both of you are. You just need to trust each other." Caitlin looked up at him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. For a moment, she seemed lost, her emotions laid bare in the furrow of her brow and the tremble in her lower lip. Then, with a deep, shaky breath, she nodded. "Okay," she said, her voice steadier now. "I'll try." Barry smiled softly, the corners of his mouth lifting in a way that conveyed both pride and relief. "That's all I'm asking." He took a small step back, giving her space, but his gaze lingered, watching her with the careful attentiveness of someone who had seen her endure so much. He shifted his weight slightly, his hands finding their way to his hips as if unsure whether to say more. Finally, after a beat of silence, he gave her a reassuring nod. "I've got to head to the station," he said, his tone lightening slightly, though the undercurrent of concern remained. "But if you need anything at all, you call me, okay?" Caitlin managed a faint smile, her lips curving upward just enough to reflect her gratitude. "Okay," she replied softly, her grip on the device tightening as though it were a lifeline. Barry turned and began walking toward the exit, his movements purposeful but unhurried. As he reached the door, he glanced back over his shoulder, his expression a mixture of hope and encouragement. "You've got this, Caitlin. Both of you." And with that, he was gone, the sound of his footsteps fading into the hallway beyond. Caitlin stood in the quiet of the lab, the MAD device cradled in her hands. She exhaled slowly, her shoulders relaxing just slightly as she began to process everything that had just happened. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the ice inside her felt less like a burden and more like a part of her, one she was ready to face. The bustling hum of activity filled the CCPD precinct, its familiar energy surging with the controlled chaos of detectives on phones, officers shuffling case files, and the occasional murmur of subdued laughter. Barry Allen stepped through the doors, his pace quick but unhurried, his mind still on the lab and the emotional moment with Caitlin. He adjusted his tie absent-mindedly, his thoughts briefly distracted as he made his way toward Joe's desk. Before he could take another step, a voice called out, a cheerful, confident tone that carried over the noise. "Barry Allen?" He turned, curiosity flickering across his face, only to find himself looking at someone unfamiliar yet instantly intriguing. A young woman was approaching him, her stride purposeful yet light, like she owned her space without arrogance. She was dressed in a smart blazer over a button-up shirt, paired with slim-cut trousers that hinted at practicality without sacrificing style. Her physical appearance was striking yet approachable. She had honey blonde hair pulled back into a sleek ponytail, a few loose strands framing her face. Her features were sharp but softened by a warm, open expression. Her hazel eyes sparkled with a mix of intelligence and curiosity, and a subtle, playful smile danced on her lips, as though she knew a secret she was debating whether to share. A badge clipped to her belt marked her as one of the CCPD's own. Barry blinked, his posture shifting slightly as he straightened. Yeah. That's me," he replied, a mix of confusion and intrigue evident in his tone. She extended her hand, her movements fluid and confident, her smile widening just enough to reveal a hint of dimples. "Patty Spivot," she introduced herself. "I'm new to the precinct. Detective West thought I'd be a good addition to the metahuman task force, so here I am." Barry reached out to shake her hand, her grip firm but not overpowering. There was a subtle energy in the gesture, a warmth that seemed to radiate from her. "Nice to meet you, Patty," he said, his own smile beginning to form. "Welcome to the chaos." Her laugh was light and easy, the kind that instantly put people at ease. "Chaos is kind of my thing," she replied, releasing his hand and shifting her weight onto one foot. Her stance was relaxed but purposeful, her hands sliding casually into her pockets. "Though, full disclosure, I didn't expect the whole metahuman thing to be this chaotic. I'm still wrapping my head around half of it." Barry chuckled, his eyes narrowing slightly in amusement. "Yeah, it's a lot. But you'll get used to it." He paused, tilting his head slightly as he studied her. "So, what made you want to join the task force?" Patty's expression shifted subtly, a flicker of determination passing through her hazel eyes. Her smile softened, becoming more sincere. "I've always been drawn to the idea of protecting people, you know? And metahumans, well, they're part of our world now. Someone's got to step up and make sure we're handling things the right way." Her voice lowered slightly, a note of personal conviction creeping in. "And maybe I just want to make a difference where it matters most." Barry nodded, his own expression mirroring her sincerity. "That's a good reason," he said, his voice warm. "It's not always easy, but having someone who cares on the team makes all the difference." Patty's smile returned, brighter this time, her eyes lighting up with a mixture of excitement and gratitude. "Thanks, Barry. I think I'm going to like it here." Joe appeared from behind a desk, his presence grounding the moment as he waved Barry over. "Alan, I need you for a second," he called, his tone brisk but not impatient. He glanced at Patty, offering her a nod. "Spivot, I see you've met our resident CSI." Patty grinned, glancing at Barry before responding. "I have, and I think he's not as boring as you made him sound, Detective." Joe let out a small laugh, his eyes crinkling at the edges. "Don't let him fool you. He's full of surprises." Barry laughed along, rubbing the back of his neck in mild embarrassment. "Well, I'll let you two get acquainted. Joe, what's up?" As Joe led Barry away, Patty watched them go, her expression thoughtful but amused. She exhaled softly, her shoulders relaxing as she glanced around the bustling precinct. Despite the unfamiliar surroundings, there was a quiet confidence in her stance, a sense that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Barry couldn't help but glance back at Patty as he followed Joe through the precinct. There was something magnetic about her presence, something that tugged at his attention and wouldn't let go. Her energy was infectious, her every movement a careful blend of confidence and charm. She seemed to belong here, even though she was new, like a missing piece of the puzzle finally falling into place. In the back of his mind, Barry couldn't shake the memory of his first encounter with Patty in his past life, watching the Flash on TV. He remembered how instantly he had been drawn to her. She had a warmth that lit up the screen, a chemistry with Barry Allen that had left him wishing she'd been more than a fleeting part of the story. But this wasn't a show anymore, this was his life. And this time, he was Barry. This time, he wasn't going to let her go. Throughout the day, Barry found his gaze drifting toward her more often than he cared to admit. She was quick on her feet, her movements fluid as she wove through the precinct, her blazer swishing slightly with each step. Her posture was always relaxed yet ready, her hands often tucked into her pockets or resting lightly on her hips as she spoke with officers and reviewed case files. Her expressions were what really captivated him. She had a way of tilting her head slightly when she was intrigued, her hazel eyes narrowing just a fraction as she processed information. When she laughed, her nose crinkled just a little, and her dimples deepened. There was an authenticity in her reactions, a genuine quality that made her stand out in a sea of practiced professionalism. Barry couldn't help but smile as he watched her engage with Joe. She was animated, her hands moving subtly as she spoke, emphasizing her points with understated but effective gestures. Joe seemed impressed, nodding along and even cracking a rare smile. Patty had a knack for putting people at ease, for drawing them into her orbit without effort. There were moments, though, when her guard slipped. Barry noticed her pausing occasionally when she thought no one was watching, her gaze dropping to the floor or out a nearby window. In those quiet moments, there was a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes, a weight she carried but didn't let define her. It made Barry's chest tighten. She was strong, but she wasn't invincible, and for some reason, he wanted to be the one who made sure she didn't have to be. By mid-afternoon, Barry found himself leaning against the wall of the break room, sipping his coffee as he watched Patty interact with a group of officers. She was laughing at something one of them had said, her shoulders shaking slightly, her smile radiant. When she caught him looking, she raised an eyebrow, her grin turning mischievous. "Alan, you're staring," she called out, her tone teasing but not unkind. Barry nearly choked on his coffee, hastily setting the cup down. "What?" "No, I was just, making sure you're settling in okay." Patty crossed the room toward him, her steps light but deliberate. She replied, her smile widening as she stopped a few feet away. "And? Do I pass your rigorous observation test?" Barry chuckled, scratching the back of his neck, a habit he couldn't seem to break. "Flying colors," he said, his voice warm. "You're definitely keeping everyone on their toes." Patty tilted her head, her expression softening as she studied him for a moment. "Well, I aim to please," she said, her tone light but sincere. Then, almost imperceptibly, her gaze lingered on him, her smile faltering just slightly as though she were considering something she wasn't ready to say. Barry felt his pulse quicken. He wanted to say something, anything, to keep her standing there a little longer, but the sound of his name being called from across the room interrupted the moment. He sighed inwardly, offering her an apologetic smile. "Duty calls," he said, stepping away. Patty nodded, her smile returning, though there was a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. "Catch you later, Barry." As he walked away, Barry made a silent vow to himself. This time, he wasn't just going to let life dictate his story. Patty wasn't going to be another chapter that ended too soon. This time, he was going to rewrite the ending. And this time, Patty Spivot was going to be the one he built his future with. As the day wound down, the precinct's bustling energy shifted into a quieter rhythm. Detectives wrapped up paperwork, conversations became subdued, and the hum of office equipment filled the background. Barry stood by his desk, shrugging into his jacket and reaching for his bag. His mind was still on Patty, on her laugh, her sharp wit, and the fleeting moments of vulnerability he'd noticed. He smiled to himself, shaking his head slightly as he adjusted his bag strap. Just as he turned to leave, a firm hand clapped down on his shoulder, jolting him from his thoughts. "So, Barry," came Eddie Thon's familiar voice, laced with amusement. "What's with you and the new girl, huh?" Barry stiffened, glancing over his shoulder at Eddie, who stood there with a grin that managed to be both friendly and maddening. Eddie's stance was casual, one hand still on Barry's shoulder, the other resting on his hip. His blue eyes sparkled with playful curiosity, and his blonde hair was slightly disheveled, as though he'd run his fingers through it one too many times. Barry frowned, shrugging Eddie's hand off and turning to face him fully. "None of your business, Eddie," he said, his tone clipped but not overly harsh. He crossed his arms, his expression a mixture of annoyance and mild embarrassment. Eddie raised his hands in mock surrender, the grin never leaving his face. "Whoa, relax, Alan. I'm just saying, you've been watching her like a hawk all day. Don't think I didn't notice." Barry sighed, running a hand through his hair as he glanced around the room to make sure no one else was paying attention. "I wasn't," he stopped himself, realizing he didn't owe Eddie an explanation. Instead, he narrowed his eyes at him, his voice dropping into a mock-serious tone. "Aren't you supposed to be busy with your own life? Or have you forgotten about your date plans with Iris?" That wiped the grin off Eddie's face, if only for a moment. He straightened, his expression faltering just slightly before he recovered, his tone shifting into something more defensive. "I haven't forgotten," he said, a hint of unease creeping into his voice. He cleared his throat, his gaze flicking away from Barry's for a split second before returning. "I was just making conversation." Barry smirked, the corner of his mouth lifting in quiet satisfaction. "Yeah, well, maybe focus on that instead of my business." Eddie shook his head, chuckling softly as he stepped back, his hands sliding into his pockets. "Fair enough, Alan. But for the record, I think she likes you too." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Barry standing there, his smirk fading into something more contemplative. Barry exhaled deeply as he left the precinct, stepping out into the cool evening air. The sky was a blend of deep blues and oranges, the city alive with its usual hum of traffic and distant chatter. He shoved his hands into his pockets as he walked, his thoughts swirling. The evening air shimmered unnaturally, the hum of Central City's life was interrupted by the sharp crackle of an energy surge. A swirling blue portal tore into existence in an alleyway, its edges sparking with erratic streaks of lightning that danced in every direction. From within the maelstrom emerged two figures. The first was a towering man clad in a sleek, pitch-black suit. His presence was menacing, his every movement exuding raw, calculated power. The red lightning bolts etched across his costume seemed to pulse like living veins, casting an eerie glow against the walls of the alley. His mask covered his face completely, save for the jagged, gaping mouthpiece that revealed rows of sharp, uneven teeth. His cold, hollow eyes were twin abysses, devoid of humanity, glowing faintly with a malevolent blue hue. This was Zoom. Zoom's posture was rigid yet predatory, his movements unnaturally fluid, almost serpentine. He stepped out of the portal with deliberate slowness, his head turning sharply as if scanning the area for potential threats. Behind him followed a woman whose presence was equally striking, though her demeanor betrayed a hint of unease. Yar. Light stepped cautiously onto the pavement, her sleek silver and black suit gleaming under the faint glow of a nearby street lamp. Her helmet, smooth and reflective, concealed most of her face, save for the mouthpiece that revealed her tightly set lips. The faint hum of her light-based weaponry was audible as she adjusted the gauntlets on her hands, her fingers twitching with a mix of anticipation and tension. Zoom turned to her abruptly, his movement a blur, and she flinched just slightly before regaining her composure. The faint quiver in her stance was subtle, but Zoom noticed. His head tilted to the side, his jagged mouthpiece parting into what could only be described as a mockery of a grin. "You're nervous," he rasped, his voice distorted and crackling like static, each word laced with a sinister undercurrent. He stepped closer, looming over her, his presence oppressive. "Good. Fear sharpens resolve and clears away hesitation. You'll need it." Dr. Light's lips tightened further, her jaw clenching as she met his hollow gaze. She straightened her posture, forcing confidence into her voice. "I'm not nervous," she snapped, though the slight waver betrayed her. "I'm ready." Zoom chuckled darkly, the sound low and guttural, vibrating through the air like the rumble of distant thunder. He began to circle her, his steps slow, deliberate. The faint crackle of his lightning punctuated the silence. "Ready," he repeated mockingly, his voice dripping with disdain. "Do you think this will be like your other assignments? The Flash is no ordinary target. He's fast, stronger than you realize. But, he's also predictable." He stopped directly in front of her, his sharp teeth gleaming as he leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper that sent a chill down her spine. "And weak where it matters most. Yar." Light stiffened, her hands curling into fists at her sides. "Then why not do it yourself?" she challenged, her tone sharp, though her voice trembled slightly. "Why send me?" Zoom's grin widened, his hollow eyes narrowing. "Because this isn't just about killing him. It's about breaking him." He raised a gloved hand, a faint blue glow sparking at his fingertips as he gestured vaguely to the world around them. His city, his friends, his love, they're his greatest strength and his deepest weakness. You'll exploit that. When you end him, I want him to die knowing he failed everyone. Dr. Light swallowed hard, the weight of the task settling over her. Her fingers twitched again, the glow of her gauntlets pulsing faintly as if responding to her unease. She nodded once, curtly, her voice low. "What do you want me to do?" Zoom straightened, his imposing figure towering over her as he clasped his hands behind his back, his movements unervingly precise. "Draw him out," he instructed, his tone sharp and commanding. "Create chaos. Make him chase you. And when he does," he leaned in once more, his jagged teeth bared. "Blind him. Leave him vulnerable. Then finish him." Dr. Light hesitated for the briefest moment, her gaze flickering downward before meeting his again. The faintest trace of doubt crossed her face, but she quickly masked it with a steely determination. "Consider it done," she said, her voice firm despite the lingering edge of fear. Zoom stared at her for a long moment, the glow in his hollow eyes intensifying. Then, without warning, he reached out, gripping her chin firmly but not forcefully enough to hurt. His touch was cold, like the void itself, and it sent a shiver down her spine. "Don't disappoint me," he whispered, his tone low and chilling. "Failure isn't an option." With that, he released her, turning abruptly and disappearing into the swirling blue portal in a blur of red lightning. Yar. Light stood alone in the alley, her breath quick and shallow as the portal closed behind her, leaving the air heavy with an unnatural stillness. She exhaled slowly, her hands flexing at her sides as she steadied herself. The doubt lingered, but she pushed it aside. This was her mission now. And she wasn't going to fail. Not for Zoom. Not for anyone. The cortex was alive with activity as the team clustered around the central console. The screens were filled with maps of Central City, each marked with glowing red points representing the strange rifts that had opened across the city. Cisco was typing furiously, his brow furrowed in concentration, while Caitlin reviewed the data he was pulling up. Professor Stein and Ronnie stood nearby, deep in discussion, while Billy leaned casually against a wall, watching the others. Barry was pacing, his voice urgent as he explained the situation. Zoom is using these rifts to send metas after me. He's not just trying to beat me, he's trying to wear me down and distract me. We need to figure out how to shut them down before more metas come through. Cisco glanced up from his keyboard, his expression skeptical. And how exactly do we stop interdimensional portals? Because, spoiler alert, that's not in my skill set. Before Barry could answer, the sound of footsteps echoed through the cortex. Everyone froze. A man had walked into Star Labs as casually as if he owned the place. He was tall, with glasses perched on his nose, dressed in a sharp gray jacket. His expression was calm, almost curious, as he glanced around at the stunned team. Caitlin and Cisco immediately jumped to their feet, their bodies tense. Caitlin's hand hovered over the console, ready to trigger the security protocols, while Cisco reached for his vibing gauntlets. Ronnie and Stein exchanged a glance and took a step closer to each other, preparing to merge if necessary. Billy stayed where he was, his eyes narrowing as he looked the stranger up and down, ready to jump in if needed. Barry raised his hands quickly, stepping between the team and the newcomer. "Wait. It's okay. He's not who you think he is." Cisco frowned, his voice sharp. "Barry, that's Harrison Wells." "The Harrison Wells. The guy who ruined all of our lives, remember?" Barry shook his head, his tone firm. "No, it's not him. Not the one we know, anyway." He turned to face the man, his voice calm but serious. "This is Harrison Wells, but he's from Earth, too." Caitlin blinked, lowering her hand slightly. "Earth, too? How can you be sure? How do you know it's not him?" Barry turned to her, his face filled with quiet certainty. "Because I know the man who killed my mom. I've seen his face, heard his voice. This guy, he's not Eobard Thawne. He's not that Harrison Wells." The man, Harrison Wells of Earth, too, gave a small nod, his expression neutral but not unfriendly. "He's right. I'm not your enemy. I came here to help." His voice was steady, with just a hint of irritation, as if he were already tired of explaining himself. Cisco crossed his arms, still not convinced. "Help us? Why should we trust you?" Harrison's gaze flicked to Cisco, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Because whether you trust me or not, Zoom is coming. And if you don't want your world torn apart, you'll need someone who knows how he thinks. Someone who's been fighting him a lot longer than you have." The room fell silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Caitlin glanced at Barry, her expression conflicted. "Barry, are you sure about this?" Barry hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah. I trust him." Cisco let out a long sigh, dropping his arms. "Great. Another Wells. Just what we needed." Harrison smirked faintly, adjusting his glasses. "You'll thank me later." The tension in the room eased slightly, though the doubt lingered on a few faces. Harrison stepped forward, his expression serious as he pointed to the map on the screen. "Now, if we're done with the introductions, let's get to work. Zoom isn't going to wait, and neither should we." Barry nodded, turning back to the group. "Let's figure this out. Together." The bustling noise of CC jitters filled the air as Barry and Cisco sat at a small corner table, each with a coffee cup in hand. Cisco was stirring his drink absent-mindedly, his brow furrowed as he spoke. "So, you're telling me we're just supposed to trust this new Harrison Wells because he says he's here to help?" He raised an eyebrow, looking at Barry over the rim of his cup. "Dude, I don't know. We've been burned before. Badly." Barry sighed, taking a sip of his coffee before replying. "I get it, Cisco. I really do. But this guy, he's not like the one we knew. He's different. You heard him, he's been fighting Zoom for a long time. If anyone knows how to stop him, it's Wells from Earth, too." Cisco leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Different or not, it's still weird. Like, couldn't the multiverse give us a Wells who's, I don't know, not involved in every major disaster we face?" Barry chuckled, shaking his head. "I don't think we're that lucky." He took another sip, his expression softening. "Look, I get your hesitation, but I've been around him. He's not here to hurt us. He just wants to stop Zoom. And we need all the help we can get." Cisco sighed, tapping his fingers against the table. "Fine. But if he turns out to be evil, or even slightly shady, I'm calling dibs on saying, 'I told you so.'" Barry smirked. "Deal." Their conversation continued, shifting from Wells to their next move against Zoom. Cisco was halfway through a comment about temporal mechanics when a familiar voice interrupted them. "Time travel?" Both Barry and Cisco froze, their eyes snapping up to see Patty Spivot standing by their table, a curious smile on her face. She had a coffee cup in one hand and a raised eyebrow that made Barry's heart skip a beat. Barry stammered, exchanging a quick glance with Cisco, who looked like he was trying to come up with an excuse but failing miserably. Patty tilted her head, clearly amused. Did I hear that right? Time travel? Cisco leaned forward, grinning nervously. Oh, yeah. Totally. We were just, talking about this new sci-fi movie coming out. You know, the classic time travel plot. Barry loves that stuff, right, Barry? Barry nodded quickly, his smile a little too wide. Yeah. Big fan of, movies. With time travel. Patty gave them a look that said she didn't believe a word of it. So, what's this movie called? Cisco opened his mouth, then closed it, glancing at Barry for help. Barry sighed, realizing there was no easy way out of this. It's complicated, he admitted, running a hand through his hair. Patty set her cup down and pulled out a chair, sitting across from them. I've got time. Try me. Cisco muttered under his breath, you're on your own, dude. Barry shot him a look, then turned back to Patty. Okay, fine. But you might not believe me. Patty leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. Try me, she said again, her tone soft but firm. Barry chuckled nervously, scratching the back of his neck as he tried to think of something, anything, that didn't sound insane. Patty just sat there across the table, watching him with those bright, curious eyes that somehow made it even harder to lie. Well. He started, dragging out the word like it might buy him time. It's not really a movie. It's more like, a book. Yeah. A book Cisco read. He glanced at Cisco, who just blinked at him slowly. Really, dude, but didn't say anything. Patty tilted her head. A book about time travel? Right. Barry nodded, way too eagerly. It's got this scientist guy who builds a time machine to stop bad guys from doing bad stuff in the future. Very science-y. Very complicated. He made a vague, wavy motion with his hand, like that explained anything. Patty raised an eyebrow, clearly not buying a word of it. So complicated you couldn't even tell me the name of it? Barry looked down at his coffee like it held the answers to the universe. It's in German, he muttered. German. Yeah. Very underground. He looked up, giving her his best awkward smile. You probably wouldn't have heard of it. Cisco facepalmed silently behind his cup. Patty leaned back in her chair, arms crossed, a half-smile on her lips. She wasn't mad. Just amused. You're a terrible liar, Barry Allen. I know, he sighed, slumping a little. I really, really am. There was a long pause. Just the ambient sound of the cafe, the clink of mugs, the low hum of conversation, the hiss of the espresso machine. Patty looked at him for a beat longer, then reached for her coffee and took a sip, her expression unreadable. Barry looked down at the table, tapping his fingers against the wood. He didn't know why he couldn't just tell her the truth. Maybe it was to protect her. Maybe it was because everything in his life was so insane right now and Patty was normal. Bright. Easy to talk to. She made him feel like he wasn't constantly on the edge of the world falling apart. He sighed. I guess I just don't want to scare you off. Patty blinked. That wasn't what she expected him to say. Scare me? Barry gave a small shrug. I mean, look, I know I'm weird. I show up late, I disappear all the time, and I give you half answers to basic questions. You deserve better than that. He looked up at her, more serious now. But I still want to be around you. Patty's expression softened. Barry, I know I mess up. A lot, he cut in gently. But I want to try something with you. Not with the lies. Just, with you. And maybe dinner. If you'd still want that. There it was. The air felt heavier, like the moment stretched long, just hanging between them. Even Cisco, who had been fidgeting with a sugar packet, froze. Patty blinked again, then slowly smiled. It wasn't teasing this time. It was warm. Real. You're asking me on a date? Barry scratched his neck again. Technically, yeah. I think I just did. Patty looked at him for a second longer, then nodded once, slowly. Okay. Barry blinked. Okay? Okay, she repeated, sipping her coffee. But if you stand me up, I will arrest you. Barry laughed, the tension melting from his shoulders like someone had flipped a switch. Fair. Patty grinned, then stood up, brushing imaginary crumbs off her jacket. I'll text you. You better pick a place that has real food, Alan. No science fiction cafes. He stood too, a little dazed. Yeah. No time travel theme. Got it. She walked away with a casual wave, her ponytail swinging behind her. Barry watched her go, his smile lingering even after she vanished into the crowd. Cisco leaned forward across the table. Dude. Barry turned to him, still grinning. What? That was the worst cover story I've ever heard. Yeah, well. Barry picked up his coffee. It still worked. Cisco shook his head, half laughing. You're lucky you're cute. Barry raised an eyebrow. Are you calling me cute, Ramon? I said lucky, man. Get over yourself. They both laughed, the kind of laugh that helped them forget, even for a second, that the city was breaking and that Zoom was still out there. Outside, the sun dipped behind the skyline. Lights blinked on across the street. Somewhere in the distance, a ripple of distorted space flickered and died. For now, the world was quiet. And Barry Allen had a date. The elevator doors slid open with a soft hiss as Barry and Cisco stepped back into Star Labs. The lighting was dimmer than usual, most of the overheads off except for the soft glow of the central console and a few flickering monitors. The quiet hum of machines filled the space, underscored by the distant, familiar beep of Caitlin's diagnostics running in the med bay. Barry slowed as he stepped into the main room, and then he saw them. Jay Garrick was standing beside Caitlin near the medical terminal, casually leaning on the edge of the console while Caitlin showed him something on the screen. She was smiling, soft, warm, and Jay was smiling back. Not smug or flirty. Just calm. Comfortable. Barry's jaw tightened just a bit. He didn't say anything. Didn't move. Just stood there, watching for maybe a second too long. Cisco, right behind him, looked between the two and whispered, oh. Barry blinked, as if snapping out of it, and forced a small smile. I'm good, he said, too quickly. Right, Cisco said, dragging the word out. And I'm Batman. Without waiting for a reply, he peeled off and made a beeline toward Caitlin and Jay like nothing was weird. Jay. Cisco said, grinning. Still rocking that whole old-school hero vibe, huh? He clapped Jay on the shoulder a little harder than necessary. Jay turned, caught off guard, but laughed anyway. Cisco. Good to see you. Sure is, Cisco replied, eyes flicking between him and Caitlin. You two were getting pretty cozy over here. Making up science puns or just awkwardly flirting in front of very sensitive lab equipment? Caitlin rolled her eyes. We were analyzing rift readings. You know, that thing we're supposed to be stopping? Cisco nodded. Sure. Barry didn't join them. He quietly peeled off, his footsteps echoing slightly as he made his way across the lab floor toward the back corner, where another familiar figure was hunched over the second-tier console. H.R. Wells. Straw hat off, glasses slightly askew, a stylus clutched between his fingers as he scrolled through layers of data like a man on the edge of a caffeine overdose. His lips were moving, muttering to himself. Fractal distortion, no, no, no. Metas don't come from banana-shaped breaches, they come from, ugh, why is everything redacted? Barry stepped up beside him. You talking to yourself or are you expecting applause? HR jumped, nearly dropping his stylus. Ack. Barry. He placed a hand over his chest like he'd seen a ghost. Could you please wear a bell or something? Barry gave a faint smirk. What are you looking at? Trying to reverse ping residual energy signatures from the breach sites, HR said, straightening up. It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack if the haystack was set on fire and launched into a black hole. Barry glanced at the screen. Dozens of digital graphs and waveforms flickered across it, all with time stamps and locations, every one of them a different rift. He frowned. You think any metas are still leaking through? HR gave a half shrug, half sigh. I don't know. Maybe. Probably. Zoom's patterns aren't random, but they're chaotic enough that we're always playing catch-up. If we could just triangulate where his base rift is, we'd have a shot, Barry finished. HR looked at him. You okay, by the way? You look like you just saw your crush holding hands with Superman. Barry blinked. What? Never mind, HR said quickly. You want in on this? We could use your speed to check the last 3 breach sites for fresh energy traces. It might help us pin down a pattern. Barry nodded. Yeah. Let's do that. He stepped around the console, hands resting on the edge as he scanned the map HR had pulled up. As the two of them dug into the data, a soft laughter floated over from behind them, Caitlin's. It was light, real. Barry didn't look back. He didn't need to. But his jaw tightened just a little more. I can just end this facade now, Barry thought. The night air rushed past him like a roaring wave. The streets of Central City blurred beneath his boots, streetlights streaking like comets in his peripheral vision. Barry Allen, the Flash, ran. Orange lightning sparked off his suit, crackling in the slipstream of his speed. His chest rose and fell steadily, not from fatigue, but from thought. Heavy thought. The kind that crawled under his mask and refused to let go. Jay Garrick. Barry's jaw clenched behind his cowl. He could still see it, Jay smiling next to Caitlin like nothing was wrong. Like he wasn't the monster tearing holes through their world. Like he wasn't Zoom in a clean shave and a silver helmet. Barry shot past a red light, his reflection flashing off the glass of a city bus. He barely saw it. How long are you gonna let this go? He muttered to himself, low and tight. How long are you gonna play nice? The streets twisted as he veered west, running parallel to the river. Bridges flashed by. Towering buildings passed like shadows. Every time his boots hit the pavement, a crackle of speed force lit up behind him. Pedestrians couldn't see him. Not really. Just a gust. A breeze. Maybe a flash of orange in the corner of their eyes if they were lucky. Maybe I should just end it, he breathed. Take the mask off. Call him out. He took a sharp turn through a side street, the world slowing around him for a split second as his mind raced faster than his body. Jay was Zoom. Jay had lied to everyone. Manipulated them. Smiled while people died. Of course, Barry knew who he was, but it seemed Zoom was not as smart as he pretended to be. The clear sign was there that he did not trust him, and the moment H.R. Wells came, Barry completely trusted him. That was sign enough. Barry's fists clenched as he pushed harder, faster. His lightning lit up alley walls and rooftops. The world trembled in his wake. What am I waiting for? But even as the question echoed, he hesitated. Something deep in his chest held him back, not fear, not doubt. Just the weight of everything. The city. The team. Caitlin. Would they believe him? Would they even want to? A spark of static hit the edge of his senses. Barry slowed slightly, head turning toward the skyline. Then he felt it. A shift in the air. Thin, like the universe inhaling. Like the seams of reality tugging loose at the edges. Dimensional rift. His eyes narrowed. The glow of the speed force pulsed behind them. He focused, sensed it. It was faint. Recent. Barely closed. Someone had come through. Someone fast enough to dodge his initial sweep. And then, in his earpiece, HR's voice crackled in, all panic and excitement. "Barry, hey, Central City Picture News just pinged. Someone tripped the breach alert system I set up, the one that tracks meta signatures. Woman. Meta. Name she gave when she strolled in? Dr. Light." Barry didn't say a word. He just ran. The city warped around him. Trees, buildings, street signs, gone in a blur. He was moving faster than he'd run all week, faster than his last encounter with Zoom, faster than logic. The orange lightning pouring off him lit the dark like a burning comet. He hit 3rd and Main in seconds. The Picture News building loomed ahead, bright and glassy, oblivious to the storm about to hit it. A security guard looked up at the front doors, too slow. Barry was already inside. He saw her immediately, Dr. Light, halfway through the lobby, her arm just starting to glow with unstable light energy. Hair down, eyes hidden behind her visor. Her lips parted in surprise as a gust of wind slammed against the walls. Then he was on her. A red blur. A crack of thunder. She didn't even have time to gasp. Barry tackled her with speed and precision, one arm wrapped tight around her waist, the other gripping her wrist to keep her from firing. The world stretched around them as he accelerated again, dragging her body with him as if it weighed nothing. The light in her hand fizzled out as she screamed, the sound lost to the wind. They were gone before her feet could touch the floor again. Back in Star Labs, a blast of wind exploded through the cortex as Barry skidded to a stop just outside the pipeline cells. Dr. Light tumbled to the floor in a daze, hair whipping across her face. She tried to scramble back, hands glowing again, but Barry was already standing in front of her, mask still on, eyes cold. "You're not going anywhere." His voice was low. Flat. No anger. Just a fact. She looked up at him, breathless. "What the hell was that? How did you even? Zoom brought you here to kill me, knowing you can't, so you know that all of this is just suicide and also your powers won't work inside there." Her eyes narrowed, the glow in her palms building again. Barry didn't move. "Try it." She hesitated. He stepped forward, just once, and the light dimmed. He didn't need to fight. The message was already clear. Behind him, HR jogged into the room, almost dropping his tablet. "Whoa. You got her already?" "That was, okay, yeah, that was fast." Barry didn't answer. He opened the pipeline cell and motioned with his hand. Dr. Light gave him one last look, fear and confusion tangled together, before stepping inside. The door hissed shut behind her. Barry stared at her through the glass. "You're gonna tell me everything you know about Zoom and his next move. That's if you know about it, and I promise you, I will let you go back to your world after I'm done with Zoom. It's your choice." Dar. Light looked away, crossing her arms. Barry turned back to HR to monitor her. "I'll question her in an hour." HR blinked. "Okay. Sure. Just for the record, you are kinda terrifying right now." Barry started walking out of the room, peeling back his mask. Good. It was late. The halls of Star Labs were dark and quiet, just the soft hum of machines echoing in the distance. Everyone had gone home. Even HR had finally left the cortex, still muttering something about caffeine and rewriting his novel. Barry stood alone. His footsteps echoed faintly as he walked back into the corridor lined with pipeline cells. The glow from the control panel flickered over his face as he stopped in front of the one holding Dr. Light. She was sitting on the edge of the bed inside, arms still crossed, her visor catching the light from the ceiling above. Barry stared at her for a moment. No words. Just silence. Then, calmly, he spoke. "Take off the mask." She looked up, cautious. "Why?" Barry exhaled. Not tired. Not frustrated. Just tired of playing games. He vibrated. It was subtle at first, just a gentle blur. Then, in one smooth motion, he phased through the wall of the cell like it wasn't even there. His arm moved fast, clean, and efficiently. Her visor was gone in a blink. He vibrated right back out. The cell hummed behind him like nothing happened. Dr. Light, Linda Park. Blinked, wide-eyed, mouth slightly open. She stood up. "I thought you said no one could use their powers in here." Barry looked over his shoulder, that small, tired smirk curling across his lips. "Yeah. I'm built different. Don't dwell on it." Linda didn't say anything for a second. She touched her face slowly, like she couldn't believe the mask was actually gone. Her real eyes stared at him now, no light tricks, no meta flare. Just her. "What do you want?" She finally asked, tone wary, almost defensive. Barry leaned against the wall beside the control panel, arms folded. "I just want to talk. Get to know you." She blinked. "Why?" "Because you're not Zoom," he said. "And I know what it's like to be dragged into something bigger than you." He paused, then glanced at her through the glass. "I don't think you want to be part of this." "Not really. I think you're scared. And I think he's using that." Linda didn't answer. But she didn't look away either. Barry stepped a little closer, his voice softer now. "I'm not here to interrogate you. Not tonight. I'm not gonna throw threats at you or force anything out of you. That's not my style." He nodded at her. "I just thought, maybe we could be friends." Linda raised a brow, skeptical. "Friends?" "Yeah," Barry said. "Talk. Laugh. Maybe help you break free from Zoom. You help me. I help you." She scoffed lightly, arms crossed again. "You think I'm just gonna switch sides because you took my mask off?" "No," Barry replied. "I think you'll switch sides when you realize you're not alone." Linda stayed quiet. Her eyes dropped to the floor for a second, like she was thinking about something she hadn't let herself think about in a long time. Barry looked at her with something different now, calm, human, patient. "You've been running for a while, haven't you?" Her voice came back low. "Since Earth, too, fell into chaos. Since Zoom started killing anyone who didn't bow down to him." Barry nodded. "Then stop running." She looked back up at him, unsure. "I don't expect you to trust me right away," he said. "But I'll be here." Not as Flash. Just Barry. Linda stared at him. There was still that guarded wall in her eyes. But behind it, something cracked. Something small. Outside the cell, Barry stood in the quiet again, hands in his pockets. He didn't say goodbye. He just turned and walked away. As he moved down the hallway, Linda looked back down at the mask in her hands. Her own reflection staring back at her. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't know who she saw. Linda stood in the middle of the cell, the soft blue glow from the walls casting a faint light across her face. The mask felt heavier in her hand now. Like it carried more than just identity, it carried history. Pain. Mistakes. She sat back down on the edge of the bed, slowly. Her fingers moved across the smooth curve of the visor without really thinking. It was quiet again. That kind of silence that made you hear your own heartbeat. She hated that silence. But right now, she couldn't escape it. Barry's words kept looping in her head like a song stuck on repeat. Then stop running. She leaned back against the wall, her eyes tracing the thin seams where the glass met the metal frame. Her lips pressed into a line. Her mind, though, no rest. She thought about the first time she met Zoom. No, not met. The first time he hunted her. It wasn't some big recruitment speech. No secret handshake. He just showed up. Killed 2 metas in front of her like it was nothing. Said if she didn't want to be next, she'd work for him. Simple as that. She was scared. Not brave. Not strong. Not clever. Just scared. And she said yes. She looked down at the mask again. How many people had she blasted through since then? She told herself she was surviving. That she didn't have a choice. But Barry didn't look at her like a killer. He looked at her like she still had something left inside her worth saving. Her fingers curled tight around the visor. Stupid, she whispered to herself. You don't even know him. But, she kind of did. The way he spoke. The way he didn't posture and didn't try to scare her or outsmart her. Just listened. Like he actually saw her. No one had looked at her like that since before all this. Before Earth, 2 burned. Before she became Dr. Light. She slid off the floor and walked slowly to the glass, staring out at the empty corridor. No one there now. No orange lightning. No judgment. Just space. Her reflection stared back at her again. This time without the mask. Linda. Not Dr. Light. That name felt strange now. Like a shirt that didn't fit anymore. She pressed her forehead gently against the glass and closed her eyes. Maybe this didn't have to be her whole life. Maybe the guilt didn't have to eat her alive. Barry said, friends. That word hit harder than she thought it would. Like a warm breeze through a cracked door. She hadn't had one of those in years. Back when she still worked at Jitters on Earth, too. Back when she still had dumb dreams and bad jokes and late-night walks through the city just to hear the street sounds. She missed that. She missed herself. A quiet breath slipped from her lips as she leaned back from the glass. Then she sat again, this time slower. No tension. Just thinking. For a long while, she didn't move. But her grip on the mask loosened. Somewhere else in Star Labs, Barry sat in the cortex with the lights dimmed, just sipping cold coffee and looking at Linda through the screen. Weeks passed. The pipeline cell stayed quiet. Linda didn't try to break out. Didn't throw threats. Didn't talk much either. She just watched. Thought. Sometimes she'd sit for hours without moving, mask in her lap, eyes distant. Some nights she slept. Most nights she didn't. And Barry kept his word. He didn't push. Didn't question. He gave her space. But he was always around. Sometimes walking past with a nod. Sometimes dropping off real food instead of those protein bars. Sometimes just sitting in the cortex, close enough that she could hear his voice if she wanted to. She never said much back. But she listened. One floor up, Star Labs had turned into something else entirely. The old training chamber, once used for the gym, was alive again. It echoed with impact, sweat, breath, and the occasional curse. Barry stood near the console, arms crossed, watching. Cisco was down in the ring, gloves on, face already glistening with sweat. Across from him stood Billy Batson, black hoodie, jeans, hair a mess, eyes full of nerves. He hadn't transformed once. Not in days. And that was the point. Barry wasn't trying to train Shazam. He was trying to train Billy. Again, Barry called out, voice calm but sharp. Billy grunted and stepped forward with a clumsy punch. Cisco ducked, pivoted, and tapped him on the side with a glove. Too slow, dude. Billy stumbled back. Frustrated. "This is dumb," he muttered. "Why not just let me say the word?" "Because you won't always have time to say it," Barry said. "One day, your mouth's full of blood and your jaw's half broken, and if you're only trained to fight as Shazam, you're already done." Billy frowned but didn't argue. He knew Barry was right. He always was. Near the edge of the room, Caitlin watched from the corner. But she wasn't just Caitlin. Frost was awake. It was subtle. Her eyes glowed faintly, breath just a little colder. A mist clung to her shoulders even though the room was warm. Barry turned to her. "You ready?" She nodded. "Yeah." He tossed her a staff. She used one back when she used to spar with Cisco and Barry. The frost instantly crept along the metal, coating it in thin ice. She twirled it once. "So, who's dying today?" "Hopefully no one," Barry said with a small grin. "But Billy could use a partner." Billy blinked. "Wait, I'm fighting her?" Frost smirked. "You'll live." Cisco stepped aside, panting. "Hey, I'm not trying to get frozen again. I'm still thawing out from last week." Barry stepped into the center of the chamber. "All right," he said. "Rules are simple. No transformations. No powers above a level 2 unless I say so. This is about timing, control, and trust." Billy nodded, already regretting everything. Frost stepped into the ring with a slow exhale. Breath turned to mist. The match started. Billy moved first, clumsy and unsure. He tried to jab low, but Frost spun, sidestepped, and tapped his leg with the staff. "Too readable," she muttered. He grunted, stepping back, sweat already on his forehead. "Try again." She wasn't holding back. But she wasn't being cruel either. Barry watched closely. This wasn't just a sparring match. It was trust building. Barry was teaching them something beyond reflexes. Something grounded. Human. How to fight when the lightning's gone. How to survive when the odds don't care who you are. How to stop running. Billy charged again. Sloppy form. Shoulders tight. He threw a right hook like it owed him money. Frost ducked, rolled under, and tapped the back of his knee with the frozen end of her staff. He dropped to one leg with a groan, arms flailing to keep balance. "Come on," she said flatly. "You gotta stop swinging like this is a street fight." He scrambled up, panting. "It kinda is for me." Frost tilted her head, eyes glowing faint blue. "Then learn how to win one." She came at him this time. Fast. Smooth. She wasn't just fighting. She was gliding, like her feet barely touched the ground. The staff cracked toward his ribs. Billy raised both arms to block. It hit harder than he expected, knocking him back 2 steps. Barry watched from above. Quiet. Not judging, just watching. Billy tried to catch his breath, shaking out his arms. "You're too tense," Barry called. "Relax your stance. Don't wait for her to hit you, read her." Billy grumbled. "Easy for you to say." Still, he listened. Dropped his shoulders. Loosened his knees. Frost smiled. Just a little. She moved again. This time, Billy didn't swing wildly. He waited. Stepped aside as her staff sliced down. It scraped the floor. He pivoted. Threw a short jab to her side. It landed, barely, but it landed. Frost stepped back and touched her ribs. "There you go." Billy blinked. "Wait. I hit you?" "You hit me," she confirmed. "Don't get cocky." He was already smiling like an idiot. Cisco laughed from the bench, towel over his head. "Kids growing up." "Shut up," Billy shot back. Then, whoosh. Frost came in again. Billy's smile vanished. He ducked the first swing and sidestepped the second. Got clipped in the shoulder by the third. He winced but didn't fall. He spun, caught her wrist, and shoved her back. For a second, just a second, he looked like a fighter. Barry nodded. But then Frost turned her palm over, cold mist swirling. Level 2, she warned. Before Billy could answer, she slammed the staff into the ground. Ice erupted beneath his feet, slick and fast. He lost balance and landed flat on his back with a thud. Okay, he wheezed. Ow. She leaned over him, hair brushing forward. Better. But you still hesitate. He stared up at her, catching his breath. I'm 12. She raised a brow. So? Billy groaned. Can't wait to be an adult. Frost offered a hand. He took it. She pulled him up with one arm like it was nothing. Barry stepped down from the platform, slow and calm. You're improving, he said. But you still think too much. Billy wiped sweat off his face. Thinking keeps me alive. Barry shrugged. Not when she's coming at you like a damn ghost. Frost gave a small grin. He's not wrong. Billy looked between them. Do you two enjoy this? Honestly? Cisco called from the corner. Yeah, kinda. Billy threw his hands up. Psychos. All of you. But his smile was creeping back. Barry clapped his shoulder. Take 5. Billy dropped to the floor, legs sprawled out, breathing heavy but content. Frost stepped back to the sidelines, grabbing a water bottle. For a moment, the room was just filled with the sound of breathing and the dull hum of the lights. Barry walked over to Cisco, grabbed a tablet, and pulled up the training logs. Billy's catching on faster than I thought, he said. Cisco nodded. Kid's got fight in him. He just doesn't believe it yet. And you? I'm fine. Bruised ego. Couple sore ribs. But I'm learning. Barry looked over at Frost. She's the one I'm watching. Cisco followed his gaze. You think she'll lose control? Barry shook his head. No. I think she's finally learning how not to. Frost leaned against the wall, eyes half closed, letting the cold mist seep from her fingers in gentle waves. Controlled. Focused. She looked calm. But Barry knew better. She wasn't calm. She was trying. And trying counted for something. Outside the training room, a shadow moved past the corridor. Linda. She was out of the cell. Technically, she had permission. Barry had unlocked the door days ago. Said she could walk around and stretch her legs as long as she didn't touch the exit. She hadn't. Now, she watched through the glass. Billy laughed. Cisco tossed him a cold drink. Frost rolled her eyes but looked relaxed. Linda pressed her hand against the glass. She didn't know what to make of any of it. She hadn't smiled in weeks. But something in her chest, small, buried, twitched. Something that remembered what it felt like to belong. To be part of a team. To be seen. Barry turned around then. Saw her through the glass. He didn't wave. The next morning came quietly. The sky was gray. Light rain tapped the glass above Star Labs. Everything felt a little slower. A little heavier. Linda stood in the hallway just outside the cortex, hands in her pockets, hair tied back. No mask. No cuffs. Just her, standing like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to breathe here. Inside, the team had gathered. Cisco was half sitting on the edge of a desk, coffee in hand. Caitlin leaned back in a chair, arms crossed. Iris sat on the couch beside Eddie, who looked half asleep. Joe stood in the corner with that look, cop eyes, arms folded, no nonsense. And at the front of the room, Barry stood in the flash suit. Cowl off. Serious face on. H.R. Wells leaned on his cane beside him, dressed like he was late for a jazz concert. Barry looked at them all. Okay, he started. So, this might be a surprise to some of you. Define some, Cisco said, sipping his coffee. Barry didn't smile. I want Linda to join the team. Silence. Not just quiet. Real silence. Iris blinked. Wait, join? As in, what? Like, help us? Barry nodded. Yeah. I think she can. Caitlin raised an eyebrow. Barry, she's Dr. Light. She was sent here to kill you. I know what she's done, Barry said calmly. But I also know what she hasn't done. She hasn't run. She hasn't lashed out. She's been here, watching, learning. And she could have escaped a dozen times. She didn't. Cisco looked toward the door. And you're sure she's not just waiting for the right moment? Barry didn't answer right away. Then he looked toward the door and said, Linda. Come in. The door slid open. Linda walked in slowly. Not like a villain. Not like a guest. Just like someone who wasn't sure what they were anymore. She stood near Barry. Didn't speak. Didn't make eye contact. The silence came back. Then, HR stepped forward, clearing his throat. I'd like to say something, if I may, he said, twirling his cane once before leaning on it. Joe gave him a look. You always want to say something. Right, HR grinned. But this time, it matters. He looked at Linda. Do I trust her? Yeah. I do. Not because she's harmless, she's definitely not. But because I've watched her. She's not trying to escape. She's not trying to play us. She's trying to figure herself out. And honestly, he turned back to the team. That's all any of us were doing when we got here. Especially me. Linda shifted slightly but said nothing. HR nodded. Dr. Light isn't a threat. Not anymore. In fact, I'd argue she's one of the better people in this building right now. That earned a raised eyebrow from Cisco. Wow. Thanks, dude. HR waved him off. You know what I mean. Barry turned to the rest of the group. She won't have full access to the labs. She won't be going on missions. Not yet. But she'll train. She'll work with us. And when Zoom's gone, she'll go back to her life. Clean slate. Iris frowned, arms crossed. You're really sure about this? Barry looked at Linda. She looked back. Yeah. I am. Then the door opened again. Jay Garrick stepped in. Not the real Jay. Not yet. Not the truth. Just the lie he wore. He looked around the room, eyes sharp, mouth tight. She shouldn't be here. Everyone turned to him. Jay stepped closer, arms at his sides. Zoom doesn't forgive. He doesn't forget. You don't understand what it means to cross him. People like her, they'll say whatever they need to survive. They'll betray whoever they need to avoid his wrath. Barry's expression didn't change. Jay's voice stayed even. She's dangerous. Barry stepped forward. And said calmly, who asked you? Jay's face twitched. Just a little. Cisco looked between them, confused. Whoa, okay. I said, Barry repeated, who asked for your opinion? Jay opened his mouth, but no words came out. Barry took another step, now toe-to-toe with him. You think I don't know how fear works? Barry said. You think I don't know what people will do to survive? I've seen it. I've lived it. Jay said nothing. Barry's eyes narrowed. And the thing is, you talk a lot about Zoom. About how scary he is. About how no one stands a chance. You've been saying it since the day you got here. Iris stood up slowly. Eddie leaned forward. Barry didn't look away from Jay. But I've never seen you fight him. Not once. You're always too injured. Too slow. Or just a little too late. Jay's jaw clenched. What are you saying? Barry shrugged. Nothing. He stepped back. Turned to the group. This isn't about him. This is about her. Everyone looked at Linda again. She met their eyes this time. No mask. No fear. Just tired, honestly. Joe finally spoke up. You sure about this, Barry? Barry nodded. Yeah. I am. Joe looked at Linda. Looked at Barry. Then nodded once. Iris didn't look thrilled. But she didn't argue either. Caitlin sighed. Fine. She trains with us. No solo missions. And I mean it, first sign of trouble. She's gone, Barry said. Understood. HR clapped his hands. Well then. Let's get this redemption arc rolling. Cisco muttered, it's not an anime, man. HR leaned closer. What's that again? Linda finally spoke. Thank you. Just a whisper. Barely a sound. But Barry heard it. He gave her a nod. You'll earn the rest. And for the first time in a long time. She believed she could. Even if just a little. Even if just for now. Later that afternoon, the lab felt quieter than usual. Most of the team had scattered. Iris left with Eddie. Caitlin was in the med bay. Barry was training with Linda in the speed lab, just light drills, nothing serious. Joe went home to check on Wally. That left Jay and Cisco, both stuck in the archive room digging through storage units. It was cramped. Dusty. Half the shelves had old devices Cisco swore he'd throw out 3 years ago. The hum of the fluorescent lights overhead buzzed louder than it should. Jay flipped through a small inventory tablet while Cisco kneeled down, prying open a metal case. For a while, neither said anything. Just the soft clink of tools. A faint sigh. The sound of a drawer sticking. Then, without looking up, Cisco spoke. Did I do something? Jay glanced at him. Cisco kept his focus on the gearbox. To Barry, I mean. Did I do something to make him mad at me? Jay was quiet for a second. Then he shook his head. No. It's not you. Cisco stood up slowly, wiping his hands. You sure? He's been cold. Not just today. Since you showed up, he's been different. Jay leaned against a shelf, arms crossed. His tone didn't change. He doesn't like me. Cisco raised an eyebrow. Come on, man. Barry's not like that. Jay looked away. He didn't like me the second I stepped into Star Labs. The way he said it, flat, simple, no bitterness, made Cisco frown. He tried to play it off, but it stayed on his face for a second too long. Jay noticed. Cisco turned away, grabbing a cable off the wall. That's weird, he said, trying to keep it casual. Barry usually gives people a chance. All that hope and trust stuff. Sometimes too much of it. Jay didn't answer. Cisco plugged the cable into the wall, pretending like he didn't feel Jay watching him. In his head, gears were turning. That kind of honesty wasn't normal. Not from Jay. And Barry snapping at him earlier? The way he stepped in front of him like that? It wasn't just trust. It felt personal. Too personal. Cisco's hand tightened slightly on the cable, but he didn't let it show on his face. He turned back around with a forced shrug. Well, maybe it's just stress. We've all been on edge lately. Dimensional breaches, Metas, Zoom. Jay's eyes didn't blink. Yeah, he said. Stress. For a moment, they just stood there. In the silence, something felt off. Like the space between them had shifted just a little. Cisco broke the tension with a small chuckle. Man, I hate this room. Smells like robot farts. Jay didn't laugh. He picked up the tablet and started scrolling again. Cisco watched him for a beat too long. Then turned back to the workbench. He didn't say it out loud. But a part of him had started paying closer attention. Not just to what Jay said, but what he didn't say. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a question started forming. A quiet, simple one. Who really are you? But for now, he kept that to himself. For now. Weeks later. The attacks didn't stop. But they got boring. It was like clockwork now. Every 3 days, the rift would pulse, a new meta would come through, and within minutes, Barry would end it. They never saw him coming. Earth 2 metas, strong, flashy, confident. Most didn't even get a second line of dialogue before they were in a pipeline cell or out cold on the pavement. Barry didn't talk much during the fights anymore. No speeches. No questions. Just run, hit, done. Team meetings got shorter. The tension between him and Jay stayed. Linda kept training, getting sharper. Quieter. She started spending more time in the med bay helping Caitlin, even when she wasn't asked. No one called her Dr. Light anymore. Not out loud. Cisco kept watching. Jay kept pretending. And Barry? Barry had other things on his mind. Because today was the date. 10:08 a.m., Star Labs. Barry stood in the speed lab, arms crossed, looking at a holographic menu rotating above the table. HR was sitting nearby, sipping tea, pretending not to spy. Too fancy, Barry muttered, swiping left. The hologram changed. Too loud. Swipe. Too crowded. Swipe. Too seafood. HR tilted his head. You want romantic, not radioactive. Think low lights. String music. Pasta you can't pronounce. Barry looked at him. She doesn't know I'm the Flash. HR paused. Oh. Yeah. Well, in that case. HR stood up, twirling his cane. Go simple. Real. Take her somewhere you like, not just somewhere she'll like. Barry raised an eyebrow. Like jitters? HR frowned. Okay, not that real. 1:32 p.m., downtown Central. Barry zipped through alleyways in civilian clothes, phone in one hand, checking locations. He stopped outside a rooftop garden restaurant, peered inside, then super speed cleaned the windows before ducking away again. He checked the weather. Windy. Light chance of rain. He ran across town to a small candle store, bought 2 vanilla bean soy candles, ran back, swapped the table centerpieces at the restaurant, then ran off again. By 2:40 p.m., he'd booked a rooftop table with the best sunset view in the city. Paid off the pianist to learn Patty's favorite jazz tune. Sent Cisco to distract any potential Earth 2 breaches. Set his emergency phone to vibrate only. Hid a small bouquet of wildflowers under the seat cushion. And somehow still had time to shave. 5:45 p.m., Patty's apartment. She opened the door, surprised. You're early. Barry smiled. Button-down shirt. Clean shoes. Nervous energy. Is that bad? No, she said, grabbing her coat. Just unexpected. She looked good. Not overdressed. Not trying too hard. Just her. That's all Barry ever wanted. 6:12 p.m., the rooftop. The sun was just starting to dip. Gold clouds. Soft breeze. No metas. No alarms. Just the sound of city life, far below them. Patty looked around, impressed. Barry, this is, wow. He grinned. You like it? She nodded, walking to the edge of the rooftop slowly. I've lived here my whole life and never knew this place existed. He pulled out her chair for her. It's new. Like, 2 years new. She raised an eyebrow. 2 years is new? For this city? Barry sat down. That's yesterday. The waiter came by. Water, menus, smiles. Barry barely looked at the food. He'd already picked their dishes earlier. He just watched her. She looked peaceful. Lighter than usual. Her eyes scanned the skyline with that detective glint, always analyzing, even on a date. She looked back at him. You're staring. He smiled. Yeah. You okay? He hesitated. Then nodded. Just, glad you're here. Patty looked at him for a long beat. Then smiled. 6:48 p.m., food arrived. Conversation was easy. Laughs came naturally. Stories about bad suspects, missed alarms, and broken coffee machines. Patty did most of the talking. Barry didn't mind. He wasn't distracted tonight. Wasn't planning counterattacks. Wasn't watching rooftops. Just her. She noticed it too. You seem different, she said. He blinked. How so? More, here. Barry took a sip of water. I've been trying to be. She tilted her head. That thing you're working on, whatever job you can't talk about. You think it's almost over? He wanted to lie. Instead, he said, maybe not. But I'm working on the exit. She nodded slowly. Just promise me one thing. Anything. Don't disappear without telling me goodbye. Barry looked down for a moment. Then back at her. I won't. She smiled again. Not just politely. Not because she was supposed to. Because she believed him. 7:21 p.m., the rift pulsed. Across town, in an abandoned parking garage, a breach opened. A man stepped through. Dressed in a black jacket and goggles, holding a small energy cannon. Earth 2 tech. He looked around. No signs of a fight. No welcoming committee. He took one step, crack. Barry appeared in front of him in a flash of yellow lightning. The meta didn't even finish his scream before the cannon was yanked from his hand, his goggles shattered, and he was pinned to the wall by 2 steel pipes Barry had bent into makeshift cuffs. Then he was gone. Back in the pipeline. No warning. No struggle. No witnesses. 7:23 p.m. Rooftop restaurant. Barry sat back in his seat, smoothing his shirt. Patty didn't notice he was gone. She was reading the dessert menu. He smiled. Anything good? He asked. She looked up. Chocolate mousse. Say no more. He raised his hand. The waiter came. Orders placed. Patty leaned back, looking at the city again. I like this, she said. Tonight. Barry nodded. Me too. She glanced at him. You always run off when things get close. He flinched, just a little. Patty saw it. Sorry, she added. Bad joke. Barry shook his head. No, it's fair. She didn't press. He looked at her again. Thought about the lies. The suit. The speed. Then quietly asked, if I told you I had a secret. Would that change anything? She looked at him carefully. Depends on the secret. He nodded slowly. Then didn't say more. 8:01 p.m., dessert arrived. They shared the mousse. One spoon, passed back and forth. Laughs turned into that easy silence where two people didn't need words anymore. The pianist played her favorite song. She noticed. He didn't take credit. She knew he had something to do with it. 8:34 p.m. outside the restaurant. Patty stood on the sidewalk, hands in her coat pockets. Barry stood beside her. The sky was dark now, city lights flickering above them. The sounds of traffic, laughter, and a bus braking. Ordinary life. He looked at her. She looked back. Then kissed him. Not long. Not dramatic. Just real. Then she pulled back. Don't let too much time pass before next time. He nodded. Promise. She turned, walking off into the city. He watched until she disappeared down the block. Then he turned. Looked up at the sky. All right, time to end this. The air inside Star Labs was tense. Barry walked in through the corridor, slow steps, shoulders squared, eyes set like stone. The Cortex lights flickered faintly behind him as he approached the team. Caitlin was checking a screen. Cisco was fiddling with his gauntlet. HR sat casually in the corner with a tea mug. Jay, or what they all thought was Jay, stood near the map display, arms folded. I'm going to Earth too, Barry said without build-up. Everyone looked up. Now, he added. Caitlin blinked. What? Barry, what do you mean? Cisco frowned. You just got back from saving 2 metas yesterday. What's the rush? I know who Zoom is, Barry said. The room froze. Even the hum of the computers felt quieter. HR slowly put down his cup. Excuse me? What did you say? Barry turned. His eyes went cold as they locked onto the man in the corner of the room. Solomon, he said. Anything to say? The fake Jay didn't flinch, but his eye twitched. Barely. Everyone turned to look at him. HR stood now, confused and defensive. What the hell is he talking about? Who's Solomon? He's Zoom, Barry said, his voice low and hard. He's been here with us all along. Caitlin stepped forward quickly, her voice rising. No, Barry, that can't be right. Jay's helped us, trained you, and even got sick trying to stabilize the Speed Force. Stop. HR's voice cut her off as he lifted the small pulse pistol he always kept under his coat. Without hesitation, he fired. The blast slammed into Jay's side. He grunted, stepped back, but didn't fall. Instead, his hand reached up, grabbed the scorched part of his jacket, and tore it away. His skin underneath shimmered faintly, like it wasn't quite human. Why would you do that? Caitlin shouted. Barry didn't react. He looked at Cisco. Vibe him. Now. Cisco hesitated. You sure? Barry nodded. Jay, or Solomon, watched them all with the same cold face. But now there was a sliver of tension in his jaw. Cisco stepped forward, hand raised. This won't take long, he said. And then it clicked. Solomon's eyes lit up. He blurred. Lightning exploded around him, blue, wild, and cracked with raw force. You shouldn't have known, he snapped. Barry blurred too. Yellow lightning tore the air apart as he chased him out of the cortex, through the hallway, and into the city. Downtown Central City erupted as 2 streaks of lightning flashed through the streets. Zoom ran ahead, but Barry was faster now. More than fast. He was precision. Purpose. Every step was a calculation. Every turn was already mapped in his head. Barry gained on him within seconds. Zoom turned and sent a pulse of kinetic energy behind him, a shockwave of compressed still force meant to knock Barry off balance. Barry phased through it like smoke. You're not faster than me, Barry called. Zoom turned mid-run, slashed his arm, and generated a crackling whip of dark lightning. He spun, trying to lash Barry back. Barry slid under it, skidded on the street, then vaulted forward with a burst that shattered the pavement beneath him. He tackled Zoom into a building wall. They exploded through brick and steel. Sparks flew. Rebar snapped. They crashed into an office lobby, rolled across the marble floor, then zipped back out through opposite sides of the building. Zoom gritted his teeth. "You shouldn't know. I erased all traces." "Doesn't matter now," Barry said, voice tight. Zoom fired a blast of pure dark speed force energy. Barry caught it. Mid-run. He absorbed it, spun, and used it to launch himself into a spiral kick that knocked Zoom into a bus stop. The metal bent around his frame. Barry landed, chest rising slow. "You're not him. You're a time remnant. One of many. Just a piece." Zoom growled, teeth blood-stained. "And I'm still enough to kill you." He ran. Barry followed. They zipped across rooftops, knocking tiles loose. Past bridges, across rivers, leaving lightning scars in the air. Helicopters tried to follow but couldn't keep up. Zoom turned hard and tackled Barry mid-sprint. They tumbled across the freeway. Cars spun out, horns blared, but Barry grabbed him and flung him upward. Zoom caught the ledge of a crane. Barry appeared above him. He drove both feet into Zoom's chest. The crane bent. Sparks sprayed. Zoom roared, caught Barry's wrist, and yanked him down. They fell together. Barry phased through the ground. Zoom slammed into it. The villain rolled, dazed, but got up again. Barry blurred into view, fists ready. They exchanged punches now. Fast. Blinding. Each heard a thunderclap. Barry's strikes were sharper. Cleaner. Zoom's were wild. Furious. Then Barry caught his leg, spun, and slammed him into the street hard enough to crater it. Zoom gasped. Barry stood over him. "You're not going to hurt anyone else." Zoom laughed, coughing. "You think this ends with me? You think you stop the storm by unplugging the lightning rod?" Barry didn't respond. He looked down at the fractured, flickering shell of a man who thought he could rewrite reality with speed. "Goodbye, Hunter." Barry vibrated his hand. One quick strike. Not through the heart. Not fatal. Just enough. He shattered the connection between the remnant and the still force. Zoom's body convulsed. His speed was gone. Ripped from him like torn flesh. The blue lightning in his veins went dark. Barry stepped back. The street was silent again. The city held its breath. Then, slowly, he walked away. Back at Star Labs, the team watched the aftermath through satellite feeds. HR was speechless. Cisco sat in the chair, arms on his knees. Caitlin said nothing. The betrayal hurt. Barry walked in a few minutes later. Scorched shirt. Bleeding lip. Calm. He looked at them. "It's over." They didn't cheer. They didn't collapse in relief. They just sat with it. Zoom was gone. But trust? That would take longer. Barry didn't say anything else. He walked past them. Into the back lab. He needed a moment. Because even if he won, he still lost something tonight. The conference room in Star Labs was packed. Barry stood at the head of the table, hands planted flat, eyes sharp but tired. The light above flickered slightly. Outside, rain tapped against the glass like a warning drum. Stein and Ronnie had just arrived, damp from travel, but alert. Dr. Light leaned against the far wall, arms crossed. Iris sat beside Joe. Eddie stood near the windows, watching the storm. HR twirled his pen nervously. Caitlin and Cisco sat side by side, silent. Billy stood behind them, arms crossed, cloak still billowing despite no wind. Barry exhaled. Zoom's gone, he said, but not destroyed. Not yet. That got everyone's attention. What do you mean? Iris asked. Barry glanced at her. Then at everyone. The version we fought here, he was a remnant. A time copy. Zoom's real body, his true self, is still on Earth too. And he's not done. Stein frowned. If he's already sent remnants to infiltrate this world, then he'll retaliate, Barry said. Hard. And soon. HR tapped his mug. You're saying we started something? No, Barry corrected. He started it. We're going to finish it. Billy stepped forward. So what's the play? Barry looked at him. I'm going to Earth too. To his stronghold. To end this. The silence was immediate. Heavy. It settled in like fog. You can't go alone, Joe said. He won't, Ronnie added. We're with him. Not all of you, Barry said. Zoom's going to fight back the only way he knows how. He'll send metas through the breach. Chaos. Distraction. We have to be ready here too. He looked around. That means splitting up. Cisco leaned forward. So who's going? Barry nodded. I need a recon unit. People who can adapt, think fast, and hit harder if things go bad. Caitlin, HR, Cisco, you're with me. Dr. Light, you too. And Firestorm. Ronnie nodded, and Stein sighed beside him but didn't argue. Barry turned to Billy. You stay. Billy raised a brow. Because I'm the strongest? Barry smirked faintly. Because you're the only one crazy enough to punch anything that moves and make it look casual. And because we need you here if this city gets hit. Billy nodded. Understood. Barry continued. Superman and Batman are already en route. Billy called them before I even asked. HR's eyes widened. Wait, the Superman and the Batman? Billy just grinned. Barry faced Joe and Eddie. The city will need order. Panic is going to spread fast if metas start pouring in. I need you both to coordinate with CCPD, seal exit points, and keep people safe. Minimal casualties. Joe nodded immediately. Consider it done. Eddie crossed his arms. And if someone gets cute with their powers? Barry's eyes narrowed. Stop them. Cisco stood. Alright, what's the entry plan? You said stronghold, what are we walking into? Barry tapped the table. A small hologram blinked to life, schematics of Earth 2, pixelated and blurry in places. Zoom's base is located in a twisted version of our Star Labs. Hidden beneath the ruins of their city center. He built it on top of collapsed ley lines, raw speed force energy channels. HR whistled. Creepy. Effective. Barry nodded. He's expecting us. We need to move fast, disable any breach stabilizers, and isolate him from the source. If he taps into those lines during the fight, he'll be worse than before. And how do we stop him from opening rifts while we're there? Caitlin asked. Cisco, Barry said. You're going to lock down the breach from our side with HR's help. Once we cross, you shut it. No one in. No one out. Until it's done. HR leaned back. No pressure. Cisco smirked. We've done crazier. One more thing, Barry added. We can't bring this fight home. No matter what happens. Everyone looked at him. If I fall, stop, Iris said. If any of us fall, Barry corrected, softer, we don't open another breach. No rescue. No retrieval. We end this there. We leave it there. Iris's jaw tightened. Billy stepped forward. We're not letting you fall. Barry met his eyes. I know. But you have to be ready. All of you. This isn't just a meta. It's a speed demon who thinks he's a god. Stein sighed. He won't be the first we've faced. Barry nodded. Then looked to each of them again. Thank you. All of you. He turned to Cisco. Open the breach. The portal crackled to life like a wound in reality. Lightning swirled. Air shimmered. Earth 2's skyline was faint behind the energy waves, dark, broken, quiet. No stars. No moon. Just faint flickers of neon buried in shadows. Barry stepped forward first, suited up. Caitlin followed, slipping on frost-dampened gloves. HR adjusted his glasses. If I die, someone delete my browser history. Dr. Light smirked faintly. If you die, I'm leaving your corpse in a vending machine. Ronnie fused with Stein. Firestorm glowed with heat. Cisco and Billy watched. Keep them safe, Billy said. Don't die until I say so, Cisco added. Barry smirked once. Then ran. The breach swallowed them one by one. And Earth 2 welcomed its ghosts. In the city, chaos had already started. A breach opened near the metro line. Another above the dam. A third in Midtown. Small squads of Earth 2 metas emerged, some familiar, some not. Flashbacks from old files. Rejected experiments. Twisted versions of people they knew. Billy transformed in the sky, thunder cracking overhead. Superman landed with a sonic boom. Batman emerged from the shadows near CCPD, already issuing silent commands through private channels. Joe ordered the lockdown. Eddie ran comms. And above it all, lightning danced. Because even if the war had moved to another Earth, the battle had already begun here. The breach snapped shut behind them with a sound like a thunderclap sucking back into itself. Silence rushed in to fill the void, thick and heavy. They stood in the gloom of a vast, circular chamber, Earth 2's breach point. The air was cold and smelled of ozone and old dust. Barry took a slow breath, his red suit a vivid splash of color in the monochrome dark. Beside him, Caitlin hugged her arms, her breath misting slightly. Firestorm's internal glow cast shifting shadows on the walls. Yar. Light held a hand palm up, a soft, ready light shimmering over her skin. Harry Wells, now back in his own world, didn't even look at them. He just straightened his jacket, a weary familiarity in his movements. He walked towards a heavy, sealed door. Welcome to my home, he said, his voice flat. It wasn't a warm greeting. It was a statement of fact, heavy with unspoken history. He pressed his palm against a scanner. A line of light traced his handprint, and the door hissed open, revealing a corridor lit by sterile, blue-tinged lights. Without another word, Harry turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing down the hall. Hey! Harry! Cisco called out. A little direction here? Harry didn't break stride. The cortex is that way, he tossed over his shoulder, pointing vaguely ahead before turning a corner and disappearing from view. I have something to check. Don't touch anything. The team exchanged looks but followed the direction he'd pointed. The corridor opened up into a wide, multi-level space that made Barry and Cisco stop dead in their tracks. Whoa, Cisco breathed. It was Star Labs. But it was off. Like a dream of a place you knew well. The layout was identical to their home, the central console, the sweeping ramps, the medical bay alcove. But the technology was visibly older. Monitors were bulkier, their frames beige and boxy. The holographic displays flickered with a lower resolution, and the gentle hum of advanced electronics was replaced by the distinct, low whir of spinning hard drives and cooling fans. A few lab-coated staff members milled about. Their faces were pale, their movements subdued. They looked like people who had been working under a prolonged siege. One of them, a young woman with tired eyes, spotted Harry as he ascended a ramp towards his old office. Dr. Wells? You're back? We didn't know. Sabbatical's over, Harry cut her off, his tone leaving no room for questions. He didn't slow down. Carry on. He vanished into the cortex, the door sliding shut behind him. Meanwhile, Barry and Cisco slowly walked further in, their heads on a swivel. It's like a time capsule, Barry murmured, running a hand over a console. The surface was clean, but a fine layer of dust came away on his glove. Our world, but a few years behind. Dude, this is the monitor we threw out in, like, 2014, Cisco said, tapping a chunky screen. It flickered ominously. It's creepy. It's like walking through a black and white photo of your own house. Caitlin approached the medical bay. The equipment was the same model she used daily, but older and more worn. A chart left on a counter was filled out in handwriting that was neat, precise, and utterly unfamiliar. It was a reminder that this was not their home. This was a reflection twisted by a different tragedy. Everyone seemed so tired, she observed softly. Dr. Light nodded, her own light dimming as if in sympathy with the grim atmosphere. This is a world that's been broken for a long time. You can feel it. Up in the cortex, Harry stood in the center of the room. His staff, a skeleton crew of the loyal, or perhaps just the desperate, watched him nervously. He ignored them, his eyes fixed on the main bank of monitors. His fingers flew across a keyboard that hadn't been touched in months. Welcome back, Dr. Wells, a prompt blinked on the screen. He didn't acknowledge it. He was pulling up old access logs, security bypasses, and energy signatures he'd spent years trying to forget. Tracy, he said, not turning. The young woman who had spoken earlier stepped forward. The localized seismic activity in the city center for the last 6 months correlated with the residual speed force energy readings from the particle accelerator's failure year 1. Overlay it on my screen. Now. His voice was a low, focused command. There was no warmth, no greeting. There was only the mission. Tracy hurried to obey. Right away, Doctor. On the main display, a complex, three-dimensional map of the city began to render. It was slow, the older computers struggling with the load. Harry watched, his jaw tight, as a pattern began to emerge. A spiderweb of energy lines, all converging not on the ruined accelerator chamber, but deep beneath it. In the sub-levels. The sub-levels he had designed. The ones Zoom had stolen. One of the male technicians finally dared to speak. Sir, we've run diagnostics on that sector a dozen times. The radiation levels are off the charts. Structural integrity is at 12%. It's a death trap. Harry finally turned, his eyes cold and clear behind his glasses. I know what it is. He looked past them, out the large window that overlooked the main lab floor. He could see the bright specks of color that were the Earth-1 heroes, looking small and out of place in his gray world. He's down there. And he's not just hiding. He's feeding. Down below, Barry's comm crackled. It was Harry's voice, sharp and clear. Alan. Get your team to sub-level 4. The main access shaft is behind the western stairwell. It's been welded shut. Your friend in the metal suit can handle it. Barry looked towards the west side of the lab, spotting the discreet, sealed door. Copy that. What's down there, Harry? The heart of it, Harry's voice was grim. Where he twisted my work into his throne room. The raw speed force conduits run directly beneath it. He's been siphoning the energy, using it to create his remnants, to keep himself powerful. To keep himself sane. Or whatever passes for it. Firestorm stepped forward, the two voices speaking as one, Ronnie's determination tempering Stein's caution. We'll get the door open. Move fast, Harry said. The second you break that seal, he'll know you're here. The subtle approach is over. Barry nodded to his team. You heard him. Let's move. The sealed door hissed as Firestorm's hands began to heat up, glowing orange-white with nuclear intensity. The steel creaked, then popped at the hinges with a heavy bang. One final blast, and the barrier caved inward, molten edges dripping down like wax. Barry stepped through first. Dust swirled in the stale air. The corridor beyond was narrow, the walls reinforced with layered concrete and insulated metal, a forgotten passage dug into the bones of Star Labs Earth 2. Dr. Light lit the space ahead with a calm glow from her palm. "It smells like burnt circuits," she muttered. Sisko brought up the rear, muttering, "Yeah, and death." They descended fast, past warning signs and ruptured pipes. The further they went, the more distorted the ambient energy became, like walking through the veins of a dying machine. They reached the lower chamber. It was massive. Wide as a stadium, with cracked tiles underfoot and dark tech humming on the walls, an old experimental lab now hijacked into something sinister. At the far end, tangled in machinery and decaying wires, a faint blue pulse shimmered. "That's the conduit," Caitlin whispered. "Pure speed force, but corrupted." Before Barry could respond, a low hum filled the room. Then a sound. Whumph. A ripple split the air behind them, a controlled breach snapping open like a slow eye. They turned just in time to see three figures step out. "Please tell me that's not us," Sisko said under his breath. It was. But twisted. Standing at the breach was Reverb, Earth 2's version of Sisko. Dressed in black, energy rippling around his fingers like liquid glass. Beside him stood Killer Frost, hair ice-white and lips painted the color of dead roses. On her other side, Deathstorm, a darker mirror of Ronnie, his chest reactor glowing a sickly blue, flames blackened at the edges. Reverb smiled. "The boss said you'd come." Barry narrowed his eyes. "Zoom sent you?" "Of course he did," Reverb said, his voice calm and sure. "He watches everything." Barry's gaze flicked to his team, jaw tightening. "Handle them." Sisko stepped forward. "Never thought I'd be throwing hands with an evil version of myself. Guess this trip really is full of surprises." Killer Frost's lips curled. "You always did talk too much." Then she flicked her wrist. A spear of ice burst from the ground. Caitlin barely dodged, then stumbled back, her eyes already changing. She closed them, took a breath, and when she opened them again, the warmth was gone. Her skin paled. Frost cracked across her arms like tattoos. "You want Frost?" she said coldly. "Fine. You got her." She hurled a jagged wave of ice at Killer Frost, and the two of them launched into a vicious duel, mirror against mirror, Frost against Frost, every blow laced with years of buried emotion neither would admit. Firestorm clashed with Deathstorm, their fusion energies colliding in midair with a deep boom that made the room quake. Ronnie and Stein fought with precision, while Deathstorm's movements were wild, erratic, and cruel. Black flame met orange fusion, and every strike sent sparks in every direction. Dr. Light spun around Reverb, sending arcs of focused solar blasts. Reverb dodged smoothly, his eyes locked on Sisko. "I can feel your vibration," he said. "Every hesitation. Every thought. You're soft." Sisko held up his gauntlet. "Then let me show you what hard mode looks like." The two launched into a blur of energy pulses, mirror sound waves, and multidimensional bursts, their duel lighting up the air in rings of clashing resonance. Barry didn't stay. He turned and ran. Not out of fear, but purpose. Because if Reverb was here, that meant Zoom wasn't. The room shook behind him as the battle raged, but Barry moved like a current, slipping through corridors, running not just with speed, but memory. He closed his eyes for half a second as he ran. Where would Zoom hide? He remembered Season 2. The way Zoom moved through shadows. The fact that he never truly relied on brute strength, he planned, observed, and controlled. Always 2 steps ahead. Harry said Zoom was feeding on speed force conduits beneath Star Labs. But Zoom would never stay this close to his prey once exposed. Barry darted up a wall, launching himself into a broken ventilation shaft. If this version of Star Labs was built with the same structure, there would be a fallback server core 4 levels up. A rarely used backup, quiet, cold, isolated. A place to monitor everything. Barry sprinted up, his lightning crackling faintly. When he burst through the final grate and into the chamber, he found empty. But not clean. The walls were scrawled with strange calculations. Speed equations. Fractured timeline models. Strings of numbers that meant nothing at first. Until Barry saw his own name embedded within them. Zoom had been here. Studying him. And the writing wasn't all in marker. Some of it was clawed into the metal. Barry walked toward the main console. It was still warm. Active. But the feed was scrambled. Static rolled over the display. Then, a flash. For just a second, Zoom's face appeared. A blur. Then nothing. Barry exhaled slowly. Damn it, he muttered. Where are you? He tapped into the console. The feed gave him a location tag. Buried deeper, off-grid. Something called Sector 12B, Singularity Node. Not listed on the blueprints, Barry murmured. Then his comm clicked. Cisco's voice, strained, "Yo, little help?" Reverb just leveled half the damn floor and Caitlin's in full frost mode. Barry smirked faintly. Hold them. I think I found where Zoom's really hiding. Coordinates? Can't risk breach tech. I'm going on foot. Tell the others to finish it fast and regroup. You sure? Yes, Barry said. He disconnected, stepped back, and took off again, faster this time. Not as a soldier. But as a hunter. Back in the lab. Frost collided with Killer Frost midair, their blasts canceling each other out in a shriek of ice. Their eyes met, both the same shade, both filled with loss. I would have been you, Caitlin said, landing in a slide. But Barry helped me. You didn't fight it. You ran from it, Killer Frost hissed, summoning a whip of ice and hurling it. Caitlin caught it mid-spin, then shattered it with a cold pulse of her own. Behind them, Firestorm and Deathstorm slammed each other into the walls. Ronnie grunted, "This guy fights like he hates himself." Stein answered in his head, "He probably does." On the other side of the lab, Dr. Light and Cisco had pushed Reverb back. "He's sinking with the breach," Cisco shouted. "If he finishes the sequence, he'll open a door straight to Zoom." "I got it, Dr." Light said, and let out a burst so bright it blinded the room for half a second. Reverb stumbled, covering his eyes. Cisco launched a resonance spike straight into his chest, sending him crashing into a console. That felt weirdly satisfying, Cisco muttered. Then the floor shook. The battle paused for a breath. Frost looked up. Barry. They all turned toward the sealed corridor. Somewhere deep in the Foundation. The real war was just beginning. And Zoom was waiting. The air in Sector 12B was different. It was still and cold, the hum of machinery absent. Barry skidded to a halt, his boots barely making a sound on the polished floor. This wasn't a lab, it was a trophy room. The chamber was circular and vast. In the center, on a throne of twisted, blackened metal, sat Zoom. The blue lightning that wreathed his dark armor cast long, dancing shadows that made him look larger than life. "Welcome, Barry," Zoom's voice was a distorted growl, echoing slightly. "I've been waiting." Barry's eyes scanned the room, and his blood ran cold. In the corner, encased in a translucent energy field, was Jessie Wells, her face pale but her eyes burning with defiance. Beside her, a man in a rust-red metal prison was chained to the wall, his head slumped forward. A familiar helmet lay discarded on the floor. The real Jay Garrick. Zoom followed his gaze. My insurance policy. A father's love is such a powerful motivator. And a living legend makes for a good puppet. Barry didn't answer. His body became a blur of motion, but not toward Zoom. He moved in a zigzag pattern, a red and gold streak that vanished from one spot and reappeared next to the prison cells in the time it took a heart to beat. Zoom was fast, but Barry was faster. He was already placing his hands on the energy field containing Jesse. The air crackled as golden lightning met the blue-tinged barrier. It shattered like glass. Jesse stumbled forward. Barry? Don't speak. Just listen, Barry said, his voice low and urgent. He pulled a small, smooth stone from a compartment on his suit. It glowed with a soft, internal light. He pressed it into her hands and closed her fingers around it. When I give you the signal, you run. You take him, he nodded toward Jay, and you run to your father. Don't stop. Don't look back. He placed his hands over hers, channeling his power. The philosopher's stone flared, and a wave of golden energy shot through Jessie. Her back arched, her eyes flying wide open as a gasp escaped her lips. For a second, tiny, hesitant sparks of yellow lightning danced across her skin. Zoom watched, his head tilted in curiosity. He hadn't moved from his throne. What is that little trinket? He growled. Barry ignored him. With another burst of impossible speed, he was at Jay's prison. He gripped the metal bars and, with a grunt of effort, tore them apart like tinfoil. He caught the falling speedster, laying him gently on the ground. He turned back to Zoom, tucking the now dormant stone away. Nothing you need to concern yourself with, Barry said, his voice calm. But it's time for this to end. Zoom let out a low, mocking laugh. He stood up, his form seeming to fill the room. And I thought you didn't kill, Barry. The heroic Flash, so pure of heart. A grim, cold smile touched Barry's lips. It was an expression none of his friends would recognize. Oh, I do kill, he said, his tone flat and final. But your fate is going to be much worse than death. He took a step forward, his own lightning igniting, casting a warm, golden glow that pushed back against Zoom's cold blue. I'm going to make you my slave. Zoom actually took a step back, the arrogance in his posture faltering for a split second. What? The black flash, Barry clarified, as if stating a simple fact. The Grim Reaper for speedsters. I'm going to bind you to the Speed Force itself. You'll have no will of your own. No thoughts. Only a single, endless purpose, to hunt. He took another step, the air cracking with the intensity of his power. And your first target? Another speedster I desperately want dead. One who has infested himself across so many timelines, I can't count them all. You're going to run him down for me. Zoom's distorted voice was a whisper of horrified understanding. Thawne. Barry didn't answer. He just shot forward. The world dissolved into a storm of light and sound. They were no longer two men in a room, they were two forces of nature clashing. Blue lightning and gold tangled in a violent dance, moving faster than the eye could follow. They ran along the walls and across the ceiling, their footsteps creating a staccato rhythm that was like machine gun fire. Zoom was brutal, all sharp angles and murderous intent. He threw punches meant to shatter bone and swiped with claws meant to rend flesh. But Barry was fluid. He was the wind. He moved around Zoom's attacks not with brute force, but with an effortless grace that was almost beautiful. He wasn't just faster, he was everywhere. A punch would phase right through him. A lunge would meet empty air where Barry had been a microsecond before. Barry wasn't trying to hit him. He was hurting him. Containing him. You can't beat me, Alan. Zoom roared, his frustration mounting. He unleashed a massive blast of blue lightning. Barry didn't dodge. He met it head-on, a shield of golden energy erupting from his hands. The two powers collided with a deafening crack that shook the very foundations of the building. The golden light didn't just block the blue, it consumed it, absorbing its energy. "You're wrong," Barry said, his voice strangely calm amidst the chaos. "This was never a fight. It's a sentencing." With a final, powerful surge, the golden energy overwhelmed Zooms. It wrapped around him like ethereal chains, pinning his arms to his sides. Zoom struggled, screaming in rage and terror, but the bonds of pure speed force energy held him fast. He was dragged to his knees. Barry stood over him, his expression not of triumph, but of grim necessity. "The speed force is out of balance because of men like you. Men like Thawne. It's time to restore order." He placed a hand on Zoom's head. The golden energy intensified, swirling around the dark speedster. Zoom's screams became distorted, deepening, and losing their humanity. His blue lightning flickered, sputtered, and then began to darken, turning a deep, bloody crimson mixed with pitch black. His suit seemed to melt and reform, becoming more skeletal, more horrific. The man known as Hunter Zolomon was gone, his consciousness erased. All that was left was a vessel of cosmic punishment. Where Zoom had knelt, now crouched the black flash. Its eyes glowed with a hellish red light. It let out a low, guttural snarl that promised only an end. Barry looked at the creature, his task complete. He pointed a finger, and a spark of gold lightning shot into the black flash's chest, implanting a target. "Now run," Barry commanded, his voice echoing with the authority of the speed force itself. "Find Eobard Thawne. Hunt him through every timeline. Through every century. Don't let him rest. Enjoy the chase," Barry whispered. "Tell Thawne I said hello." The black flash tilted its head, a predator catching a scent. Then, with a sound like a dying thunderclap, it vanished. The room was suddenly, deafeningly silent, the only light coming from Barry's fading gold lightning. The silence left behind by the black flash was heavier than any sound. Barry stood alone in the vast, dark chamber, the only light coming from the fading gold sparks at his feet. He took a slow, deep breath, the kind that comes after holding it for too long. The air still tasted of ozone and fear. His eyes swept across Zoom's throne room, the twisted metal, the monitoring stations, and the containment cells that had held Jesse and Jay. This place was a monument to pain. It couldn't stand. He closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the speed force not as a tool, but as a part of him. It hummed in his veins, a river of limitless energy. When he opened them, his lightning flared, not in a burst, but in a sustained, brilliant wave of gold that erupted from his core. He began to run. He didn't run in a straight line. He became a living storm, a whirlwind of pure speed that shot through every corner of the sector. He didn't just break things, he unmade them. His vibrations tuned to the resonant frequency of the concrete, the metal, and the very wiring in the walls. Support beams shattered into dust. Consoles exploded into showers of inert components. The black throne melted into a puddle of molten slag. The room groaned, buckled, and then imploded in on itself as Barry shot out of the entrance, a golden comet trailing destruction. He didn't look back. There was nothing left to see. Back in the main lab, the fight was over, but the tension was a live wire. Reverb, Killer Frost, and Deathstorm were contained in shimmering energy fields, but their hatred pulsed against the barriers. Caitlin, her skin returned to its normal tone but shivering slightly, watched her frozen double with a complex mix of pity and relief. Firestorm kept a wary eye on the snarling Deathstorm. Dr. Light's palm still glowed, ready. Then, a flash of gold. The air popped. Barry stood in the center of the room, his suit smudged with concrete dust, his expression tired but clear. The oppressive weight of Zoom's presence was gone. "It's done," he said, his voice cutting through the static of the containment fields. The three doppelgangers seemed to feel it too. Reverb's arrogant smirk vanished, replaced by a look of stunned defeat. Killer Frost stopped pounding on her prison, her icy glare losing its fire. Their leader was gone. Their purpose had evaporated. What did you do to him? Reverb asked, his voice barely a whisper. Barry looked at him, his gaze flat. I gave him a new job. One he can't quit. He turned to the others. We'll find a place for them. A proper prison. They're not our problem right now. He walked past them, his focus already elsewhere. In a quieter corner of the lab, Jesse was kneeling next to Jay Garrick, who was now sitting up, sipping water from a cup Harry had given him. Harry himself was hovering, his usual gruffness replaced by a raw, open worry as he looked at his daughter. Barry approached, his footsteps soft. Jay looked up. His eyes, though weary, were sharp and intelligent. He had the bearing of a soldier. Jay Garrick, Barry said, offering a small, weary smile. I've heard a lot about you. Most of it probably bad, thanks to that imposter, Jay replied, his voice rough but steady. He looked Barry up and down. But you're the real article. Thank you. For me. For her. He nodded toward Jesse. It's what we do, Barry said simply. He crouched down to their level. There's something you should know, Jay. On my Earth, you have a doppelganger. A man named Henry Allen. He's my father. Jay's eyebrows raised in surprise. He looked at Barry with a new sense of familiarity, as if seeing a ghost of a relative. Is that so? Is he a good man? The best, Barry said, his voice thick with emotion for a moment. It'd be good for you two to meet one day. I think you'd like each other. A genuine smile, the first in a long time, touched Jay's lips. I'd like that. Barry then turned his attention to Jesse, who was practically vibrating with a new kind of energy. Tiny, golden sparks still occasionally flickered at her fingertips. And you, Barry said. How are you feeling? Alive, she breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. I can feel everything. The air moving, the electricity in the walls, it's like I'm awake for the first time. That's the speed force, Barry said. It's a gift. But it's a dangerous one. He looked at Jay. I have to get back to my world. Our city was under attack when we left. I need you to do something for me, Jay. Name it. Teach her. Barry nodded toward Jesse. You know what it's like. The rules, the dangers. How to run without getting lost. She's going to need a teacher. She shouldn't have to learn it all alone. Jay placed a firm hand on Jesse's shoulder. It would be my honor. Harry watched the exchange, his throat tight. He looked at Barry, and for once, there was no sarcasm, no deflection, just pure, unspoken gratitude. Alan. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Harry, Barry replied. Just take care of your family. At that moment, Cisco came over, clapping Barry on the shoulder. Dude. You look like you just ran through a demolition derby. Also, save the multiverse. Again. No biggie. Barry managed a tired chuckle. We saved it, Cisco. All of us. I just closed the book. Cisco's smile was bright, a beacon of normalcy in the weirdness. Yeah, well, this chapter was insane. Evil doppelgangers, speedster grim reapers. I'm gonna need a long vacation. And maybe a new playlist. He looked around at the battered but victorious team, at the reunited father and daughter, at the freed legend. We did good, man, Cisco said, his voice softer. We brought them this far. Barry followed his gaze. He saw Caitlin, finally at peace with the power inside her. He saw Ronnie and Stein, a perfect, fiery union. He saw the hope return to Harry's eyes. He saw a new speedster born and an old one freed. Yeah, Barry said, a real, warm smile finally breaking through his exhaustion. We did. He took one last look at Earth 2 Star Labs. It was still a broken world, but now, it had a chance to heal. The light was finally breaking through the cracks. Let's go home. The rain over Central City had turned to a fine, cold mist, but the real storm was happening on the streets below. A 3-story tall meta made of shifting concrete and rebar was stomping down Main Street, swatting aside cars like toys. Superman hovered in front of it, his red cape a stark banner against the gray sky. He took the blows without flinching, the impact sounding like distant gongs. The core is in its chest. Batman's voice was a low growl in Clark's earpiece. He was a phantom in the shadows of a nearby office building, coordinating the defense. I'm reading a power signature similar to the breach energy. Contain and disrupt. Trying, Clark said, strain in his voice as he grabbed the creature's massive arm. He wasn't trying to punch it, he was trying to hold it still. High above, a bolt of lightning split the sky, followed by a thunderous crack. Shazam slammed into the meta's shoulder, shattering a chunk of concrete. Hey, big guy. Miss me? Billy yelled, his youthful voice echoing with power. The creature roared, swiping at him. Shazam zipped away, laughing. Whoa, slow down. You're gonna give yourself a heart attack. Elsewhere, chaos reigned. A meta who could project sharpened sound waves was shredding the facade of the city bank. Joe and the CCPD had set up a perimeter, their bullets doing nothing but pinging off the sonic shield. Fall back. Fall back. Joe yelled into his radio. We need to draw him into the open. Eddie, from a rooftop across the street, lined up a shot. I can't get a clear angle, Joe. He's too well covered. Suddenly, a blur of red and gold light streaked down the street. Dr. Light landed in a crouch, throwing up a brilliant shield of hard light that absorbed the sound blasts. I've got this, she called out, pushing forward step by step. Just keep him focused on me. The meta screamed, intensifying his attack. The shield began to flicker. Then, from a side alley, there was a soft thwip. A high-tensile cable shot out, wrapping around the sound meta's wrists. Before he could react, the cable went taut, yanking his arms apart and breaking his concentration. The sonic shield vanished. A green hooded figure dropped from a fire escape, landing squarely on the meta's back. He delivered 2 precise, brutal strikes to the back of the neck. The meta grunted and crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Oliver Queen stood up, pulling an arrow from his quiver and scanning the area. His eyes, sharp and weary, met Joe's across the street. He gave a short, curt nod. Joe just stared for a second, then nodded back. Thanks. On the main drag, the fight with the concrete giant was reaching its climax. Superman had managed to get a full Nelson hold on it from behind, his boots digging trenches in the asphalt as he held it fast. Shazam! Now! Clark grunted. On it! Shazam flew straight at the creature's chest, his fist pulled back, crackling with divine lightning. Hey, Superman! Bet you can't do this. He punched. A spectacular explosion of light and sound erupted from the creature's torso. The concrete shell shattered outward, revealing a pulsing, violet core within. The giant froze, then began to crumble into an inert pile of rubble. Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of small fires and the distant sirens. Superman landed gently, brushing dust from his shoulders. Shazam touched down beside him, a wide grin on his face. See? Easy. Batman emerged from the shadows, his cape blending into the gloom. There are 2 more breach points active. We're not done. It was then that they all noticed the new arrival. Oliver walked toward them, his bow still in hand. He stopped a dozen feet away, his gaze sweeping over the 3 of them. It lingered on the S-shield, then the bat symbol, then the lightning bolt. A faint, almost imperceptible smirk touched his lips. So, he said, his voice gravelly and direct. You're the ones causing all the noise. Superman took a small step forward, his posture open but cautious. "We've heard about you. The vigilante in Star City." "Arrow," Batman stated, his tone implying he had a file an inch thick already. "I've heard the stories too," Oliver replied, his eyes locking with Batman's. "The Bat. The Man of Steel." He glanced at Shazam. "And the guy with the magic word." "Hey!" Shazam protested. "I'm a crucial part of this team." Oliver ignored him, looking back at Superman and Batman. "I was in the neighborhood. Looks like you had a situation." "We have a situation," Batman corrected. "It's multiversal. A friend of ours is handling the source," Clark added, his voice calm and reassuring. "We're just containing the fallout here." Oliver gave another slow nod, taking in the destruction around them. He'd seen a lot, but talking about other universes was new. "Fallout looks messy. What do you need?" Before anyone could answer, a new breach, smaller and unstable, ripped open at the end of the street. A hulking figure with 4 arms and skin like granite charged out, roaring. Batman was already moving. Shazam, left flank. Superman, high-altitude distraction. Arrow. He glanced at Oliver, who already had an arrow knocked. "I'll find the high ground," Oliver said and melted back into the alleyways. The battle started again, but it felt different now. Coordinated. An arrow whistled from a rooftop, exploding into a thick foam that ensnared the Meta's legs. Superman swooped down, drawing its attention upward. Shazam came in from the side with a lightning-charged haymaker. Watching from the CCPD barricade, Joe let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Eddie came up beside him. "Who's the guy in green?" Eddie asked. "I have no idea," Joe said, shaking his head in disbelief. "But for the first time tonight, I think we might actually get through this." As the 4-armed Meta finally fell, the last active breach sputtered and died. The immediate threat was over. Oliver dropped down from his perch, landing silently beside the others. The rain began to pick up again, washing the dust and grime from the streets. "Is that it?" Oliver asked. "For now," Batman said, his gaze fixed on the spot where the breach had been. "But the war isn't over." Superman looked at Oliver, a genuine look of gratitude on his face. "Thank you for your help." Oliver just shrugged, a solitary figure in the downpour. "We protect people. That's the job." High above, the clouds began to part, a single beam of moonlight breaking through to illuminate the battered but still standing city. They were a strange team, thrown together by chaos. But for tonight, it was enough. The rain was letting up, leaving the streets of Central City glistening under the broken emergency lights. But the air still crackled with unnatural energy. 2 final, pulsing breaches remained open, each disgorging a fresh wave of chaos. Batman's voice cut through the comms, calm and absolute. "The breach at 5th and it is the source. It's generating the others. Arrow, you're with me. We close it at the source. Superman, Shazam, containment and cleanup. Keep them off us." On a rooftop overlooking the unstable vortex of energy, Batman didn't wait for a reply. He was already firing a grappling hook. Oliver Queen landed silently beside him, his bow in hand. "You have a plan for that?" Oliver asked, his eyes fixed on the swirling, violent tear in reality. "The energy is unstable. It needs a counter-frequency," Batman stated, pulling a modified device from his belt. "I'll plant this at the epicenter. You cover me. The metas it's spitting out will be drawn to protect it." Oliver knocked an arrow. Just another Tuesday. Down on the streets, it was anything but quiet. "Okay, big guy." Shazam yelled, zipping past Superman. "I see 3 over by the library. That makes my count." 8. Superman hovered for a second, a faint smile on his face as he scanned the area. "I count 9. You missed the one with the wings on the clock tower." With a sonic boom, he was gone, a blue and red streak intercepting a flying meta before it could dive bomb a news van. "Hey, no fair. You've got X-ray vision." Shazam complained, but he was already laughing, slamming into a woman who was firing blasts of molten tar. The impact sent her sliding back 50 feet into a waiting net of Superman's precise heat vision, solidifying the tar around her. It was a bizarre, high-stakes dance. Superman moved with impossible grace and economy, every movement calculated to neutralize a threat with minimal collateral damage. Shazam was a thunderclap of raw power, all bright lights and booming laughs, but his hits always landed exactly where they needed to. 10. Shazam shouted, encasing a meta's legs in a block of ice. 11. Superman corrected calmly, using his freeze breath to gently lower a levitating car full of civilians back to the ground before pinning the telekinetic meta who'd lifted it against a wall with a focused gust of wind. Across town, the scene was darker, more tense. Patty Spivot, her CCPD vest soaked through, helped an elderly man out of a wrecked bus. Her sergeant had ordered an evacuation, but she'd stayed behind to make sure everyone was clear. "Almost there, sir, just a little further," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline. A low growl echoed from the other end of the street. One of the last metas, a hulking brute with skin like cracked asphalt and claws that scraped grooves in the pavement, had spotted them. It was one of the ones spat out from the main breach, and it was heading straight for them. Patty drew her service weapon. "Stop. CCPD." The meta didn't even slow. It broke into a charge, a rumbling juggernaut of destruction. Patty fired. The bullets pinged off its hide. She stood her ground, firing again and again, a desperate, futile act of bravery. The meta was 10 feet away, its clawed hand rising to strike. Time seemed to slow. Patty closed her eyes. Then, a sound like the sky tearing open. A streak of scarlet lightning cut between her and the meta. The world snapped back to normal speed with a thunderclap. The meta was gone, slammed through the wall of a nearby building. Standing in front of Patty, his back to her, was the Flash. Red suit, bright yellow lightning emblem, a faint haze of steam rising from his shoulders in the damp air. Patty lowered her gun, her hands trembling. She'd heard the stories, seen the blur on the news. But this was different. He was real. The Flash turned his head slightly, just enough for her to see the profile of his cowl. "You okay?" His voice was faster than a normal person's, a low, vibrating hum that was strangely calming. She could only nod, her breath caught in her throat. "Get to safety." "It's almost over," he said. And then he was gone, a red blur vanishing down the street. Back at the main breach, Batman was a phantom in the chaos. He moved through the shadows, dropping smoke pellets and using targeted, non-lethal explosives to disorient the metahuman guards. An energy blaster took a shot at him. An arrow from the darkness above severed the weapon's power pack before it could fire again. "Thanks," Batman grunted into his comm. "Don't mention it." Oliver's voice came back, cool and focused. "Just plant your toy." Batman reached the epicenter of the swirling energy. The device in his hand whirred to life. He slammed it into the ground, and a low, resonant pulse began to emanate from it. The breach flickered, the violent purple light stuttering. The remaining metas, sensing their lifeline was dying, went berserk, converging on Batman's position. That's when the Flash arrived. He became a storm of motion, a red tornado. He didn't punch them, he disassembled their momentum. He'd run past one, and its legs would be tangled in cabling. He'd zip around another, and its weapons would be dismantled into harmless components at its feet. He was a force of pure physics, neutralizing threats with impossible speed. On the rooftop, Oliver saw his opening. He fired a series of explosive arrows into the ground around the breach, creating a perimeter of fire and confusion, keeping the stragglers back. "The frequency is synchronized," Batman said, his fingers flying over a wrist computer. "The breach is collapsing." The unstable vortex began to shudder violently, sucking light and debris back into itself. The other, smaller breaches across the city winked out of existence one by one. With a final, deafening implosion, the main breach collapsed, leaving behind only scorched asphalt and an eerie silence. The last Meta, confused and disoriented, was gently pinned to the ground by Superman, while Shazam landed nearby, his lightning fading. So, who won? Shazam asked, looking between Superman and the now clear streets. Superman gave a small smile. The city did. On the ground, Patty Spivot finally let out the breath she'd been holding, watching the red blur stop in the middle of the street. The invasion was over. The Flash stood for a moment, a solitary sentinel in the aftermath, before vanishing once more into the city he protected. The cortex of Star Labs felt like a different world from the battle-scarred streets outside. The usual hum of computers was drowned out by the easy laughter and relieved chatter of people who had just stared down the abyss and lived to talk about it. On one side of the room, Ronnie had his arm around Caitlin, both of them leaning against a console and sharing a quiet moment. She'd rest her head on his shoulder for a second, then laugh at something he whispered. The last of the frost in her eyes completely melted away. Iris and Eddie were by the coffee maker, their hands briefly brushing as they reached for a sugar packet at the same time. They didn't pull away, just shared a small, tired smile. The unspoken thing between them felt a little lighter now. The real noise was coming from the central holodable. Cisco, Billy, and Clark were hunched over a tablet, playing some frantic, brightly colored video game. No, no, no. The red shell. He's got the red shell. Billy yelled, jabbing at the screen. I see it. Cisco shouted back, frantically tilting his tablet. I'm weaving. I'm weaving. Clark just smiled, his fingers a calm, deliberate blur. You know, I can see the pixel refresh rate. It gives me a slight advantage. Slight advantage? You're in first place. Billy groaned as Clark's character crossed the finish line, the tablet playing a triumphant fanfare. In the midst of this warmth stood a small island of grim intensity. Barry, still in his Flash suit but with the cowl down, stood with Batman and Green Arrow. The two vigilantes were still fully masked, their postures rigid, as if the party around them was a security threat to be assessed. Barry looked from one to the other, a tired but amused smirk on his face. You guys realize the world isn't ending anymore, right? You can maybe unclench a little. Batman's cowl remained fixed on Barry. The danger has passed. The protocol remains. Oliver crossed his arms, his voice a low grumble. Some of us have lives to get back to. Lives that require a separation. Barry let out a long, exasperated sigh. He ran a hand through his sweat-damp hair. You too. I mean, seriously. You just fought back an invasion from another Earth side by side. You trusted each other with your lives out there. But you can't trust each other with a first name in here? It's not about trust, Batman stated, his tone leaving no room for argument. It's about discipline. It's about survival, Oliver corrected, his gaze sharp. Barry shook his head, a laugh escaping him. It was all just too ridiculous. He decided to cut the tension with the sharpest knife he had. Okay, fine. Oliver, he said, pointing at the Green Arrow. You know he knows who you are, right? Like, he's known. The air in their little circle went still. Oliver's head snapped towards Batman, his body tensing like a drawn bowstring. What? Batman didn't even flinch. Oliver Queen. Returned from 5 years shipwrecked on Lienyu. Took up the mantle of the Arrow to combat the corruption in Star City. I've known since the week you came back. Oliver was utterly silent for a long moment. The confident vigilante was gone, replaced by a man whose most carefully guarded secret had just been casually tossed out like yesterday's news. He looked exposed. How, he finally managed, his voice tight. Barry just shrugged, gesturing toward Bruce as if presenting a museum exhibit. Dude. He's Batman. The simple, undeniable truth of that statement hung in the air. What could Oliver possibly say? He uncrossed his arms, his shoulders slumping just a fraction. The fight went out of him. Before anyone could say another word, Barry's personal phone, sitting on the table next to him, vibrated with an incoming call. The screen lit up with the name Patty. "Oop, gotta take this," Barry said, his entire demeanor shifting from weary team leader to a guy with a suddenly very important call. He scooped up the phone. "And Bruce, for the love of God, take the pointy ears off for 5 minutes. You're freaking out the normies." He offered his two stunned, legendary friends a final, bright grin, then turned and walked away, already answering the phone. "Patty? Hey. Yeah, I'm okay. A little busy at the lab, but I'm fine. Did you get out of the city okay?" He left Batman and Green Arrow standing alone in the middle of the cheerful chaos. The silence between them was now profoundly different. The wall was gone. Bruce reached up, and with a quiet hiss of pressurized air, he removed his cowl. Oliver watched him, seeing the face of Bruce Wayne for the first time. The tired eyes, the sharp features. It was somehow both exactly what he expected and completely surprising. After a moment, Oliver reached up and slowly pulled his own hood back, then unclipped his mask. Bruce gave a single, slow nod. "Oliver." "Bruce," Oliver replied. The name felt strange in his mouth. They stood there, two billionaires who had built themselves into something more, finally seeing each other. The pretense was gone. From across the room, Clark watched the exchange, a small, knowing smile on his face. He'd been through this himself. He turned back to the game as Billy launched into a dramatic story about how he totally would have won if not for Superman's supervision cheat. Caitlin laughed at something Ronnie said, the sound warm and genuine. Iris leaned into Eddie's side, and he didn't move away. Barry, now by the window, talked animatedly on the phone, his free hand gesturing as he assured Patty he was safe. For a single, quiet moment, surrounded by the people he loved most, the war felt truly over. They had saved the world, and in the process, maybe managed to save a little bit of themselves, too. The lights of Central City glittered in the distance, no longer under threat, just beautiful and peaceful. Barry leaned against the cool glass of the Cortex window, the phone pressed to his ear. The sounds of the celebration behind him, Cisco's laughter, the beeping of the game, faded into a distant hum. All that mattered was the voice on the other end of the line. "I'm just glad you're safe," Patty said, her voice laced with a relief that mirrored his own. "It was crazy out there. For a second, I thought, well, you know." "Yeah," Barry said softly, his eyes tracing the lights of the city. "I know." He took a deep breath, his grip tightening on the phone. "Patty, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago." There was a slight pause on her end. "Okay. You sound serious. What is it?" "It's not something I can say over the phone. It's big. And it's kind of hard to explain." He straightened up, a new resolve settling over him. "Where are you right now?" "I'm at my apartment. 144B Harrison Street." "Why?" "Stay there," Barry said, a faint, almost nervous smile touching his lips. "I'll be there in a flash." He ended the call before she could respond. For a moment, he just stood there, watching his friends. Bruce and Oliver were actually talking, their masks off, their postures less like statues. It gave him the final push of courage he needed. He took a step, and the world blurred into streaks of light and color. Patty stared at her phone, the dial tone buzzing in her ear. "I'll be there in a flash." That was a weird thing to say. She shook her head, a small, confused smile on her face. Barry could be so dramatic sometimes. She had just set the phone down on her kitchen counter when a gentle gust of wind rustled the papers on her coffee table. She turned, and her breath caught in her throat. Barry Allen was standing in the middle of her living room. He wasn't out of breath. He wasn't sweating. He was just there. As if he'd been there all along. The street was 15 miles from Star Labs. It was impossible. "Barry," she whispered, her eyes wide. "How did you?" He looked different. The usual easygoing lab tech was gone, replaced by someone with a weary weight on his shoulders. He was still in his dark jeans and a Star Labs shirt, but he stood with a new kind of certainty. I ran," he said, shoving his hands in his pockets. "You ran." Patty blinked, her mind refusing to connect the dots. "From Star Labs? That's not possible. I just hung up with you 5 seconds ago." "It's possible for me," he said, his voice quiet but steady. He looked around her cozy apartment, the books stacked on the floor, the framed photo of her and her dad on the wall, then his gaze returned to her. "This is what I needed to tell you." A cold knot of understanding began to form in Patty's stomach, but she fought it. "Barry, what are you talking about?" He took a slow step forward. "The night the particle accelerator exploded. I was in my lab. I was struck by lightning, doused in a cocktail of chemicals. And I didn't die. I woke up from a 9-month coma, and the world had slowed down." He met her eyes, his own full of a painful honesty. "Because I hadn't. I was fast." Patty took an involuntary step back, her hand reaching for the counter to steady herself. The stories. The blur of red she'd seen on the news. The scarlet lightning that had saved her life just hours ago. "No," she breathed, shaking her head. That's crazy." "I know it sounds crazy," Barry said, his voice pleading for her to understand. "But think about it. My late excuses. Always disappearing right before the flash shows up. How I knew you were okay tonight before anyone else could." He gestured to the space between them. "How I got here." The pieces slammed together in her mind with the force of a physical blow. The friendly, clumsy, brilliant Barry Allen. The mythic, impossible speedster. They were the same person. The room felt like it was tilting. "You," she stammered, pointing a trembling finger at him. "You're him. You're the Flash." Barry just nodded, his expression open and vulnerable, waiting for her judgment. All the air seemed to leave Patty's lungs. She slid down to sit on the floor, her back against the kitchen cabinets. She stared at him, really seeing him for the first time. The subtle strength in his frame she'd never noticed before. The faint scars on his hands. The profound tiredness in his eyes wasn't just from a long night at the lab. "All this time," she whispered, her voice shaky. "All those times I talked about him, about how amazing he was, you were just standing there." "I wanted to tell you," Barry said, his voice thick with emotion. He came and sat on the floor a few feet away, not crowding her, just being there. "Every single day, I wanted to. But this secret, it doesn't just belong to me. Knowing it puts a target on your back. I was trying to protect you." Tears welled in Patty's eyes, a confusing mix of betrayal, awe, and fear. "The man who saved me tonight, that was you. That will always be me," he said softly. "If you're ever in danger, I will always come for you. No matter what." She hugged her knees to her chest, trying to process it all. The world had just gotten infinitely bigger and more terrifying. The quiet, normal life she was trying to build felt like a distant memory. "Why now?" she finally asked, wiping at her eyes. "Why tell me now?" "Because almost losing you tonight made me realize that keeping you in the dark wasn't protecting you," he said. "It was just pushing you away. And I don't want to do that anymore." They sat in silence for a long moment, the only sound the faint hum of her refrigerator. The hero and the cop, sitting on a scuffed wooden floor in a pool of lamplight. Slowly, Patty uncurled herself. She reached out, her hand hesitating for a second before she laid it on top of his. His skin was warm. "Okay," she said, her voice still a little unsteady but firm. Barry looked at her, hope flickering in his eyes. "Okay?" "Okay," she repeated, squeezing his hand. "It's a lot to, well, a lot to everything. And I'm probably going to have about 1,000,000 questions. But, okay." A real, genuine smile finally broke through Barry's anxious expression. It was like the sun coming out. He laced his fingers with hers. "I'll answer every single one," he promised. Outside, the city was quiet, finally at peace. And in a small apartment on Harrison Street, a new beginning, built on a foundation of truth, was just starting to dawn. The silence in Patty's apartment was warm and heavy with shared secrets. Barry finally pulled away, his hand lingering in hers for a moment. "I should go," he said softly. "Let you process all this." He gestured vaguely at himself. Patty nodded, a dazed but genuine smile on her face. "Yeah. 1,000,000 questions, remember? I need to make a list." He grinned. "I look forward to it." With a final squeeze of her hand, he stood. "I'll call you tomorrow." He didn't run to the door. He simply vanished. There was no gust of wind this time, no blur. One moment he was there, the next, the space where he'd been was empty. Patty stared at the spot, shaking her head in wonder. Barry reappeared in the Speed Lab, the heart of Star Labs. It was deep in the sublevels, a vast, circular chamber lined with humming machinery and reinforced to withstand his experiments. It was also completely private. The celebration was still going on upstairs, but down here, it was just him and the hum of the generators. He leaned against a central console, finally allowing himself a full, deep breath. The fight with Zoom, the invasion, and revealing himself to Patty. It had been a tidal wave of pressure. And beneath it all, a constant, subtle hum had been growing in the back of his mind. A new awareness. He closed his eyes and focused inward. A familiar, translucent blue screen materialized in his vision, its data crisp and clear. Status update, conflict resolved. Experience accumulated. User, Bartholomew Barry Allen level, 12 experience, 280/1500 health, 100% energy signature, optimal credits, 5700. A faint smile touched his lips. Level 12. The fight with Zoom, the consolidation of his control over the forces, it had pushed him further than he'd realized. He focused, and the detailed readouts cascaded before his mind's eye. Abilities, Level 12 Mastery Speed Force, Enhanced Speed, can traverse continents in seconds. Time perception is so accelerated that light appears to move in slow, viscous waves. Accelerated healing, regenerates from a single cell. Near instantaneous recovery from total physical disintegration. Enhanced perception, can process the entire data stream of the planet's internet in a nanosecond. Predicts opponent movements by analyzing quantum probability. Speed Force knowledge, can consciously alter the laws of physics in a localized area. Creates stable, permanent speed force constructs. Temporal awareness, perceives the entire flow of a timeline from birth to death at a glance. Can identify and track temporal echoes. Strength Force, enhanced strength, can shift tectonic plates. A single punch can alter a planet's orbit. Durability, can withstand a direct hit from a star-going supernova. Skin cells can automatically phase to let unstoppable forces pass through harmlessly. Force projection, can generate planet-wide force domains. Projects concentrated blasts that can punch holes through dimensions. Sage Force, enhanced intellect, thinks in multiple dimensions of logic simultaneously. Can out-strategize hyper-intelligent AI from the 30th century. Mental fortitude. His mind is a fortress. Psychic assaults shatter against his consciousness. Can instantly reverse mental attacks back onto the sender. Telepathy, can hold a silent conversation with every sentient being on a planet at once. Can communicate across time, sending thoughts to the past or future. Still force time manipulation. Can freeze time across an entire solar system for up to 1 hour. Can selectively age or rejuvenate objects or beings. Inertia control. Can nullify the Big Bang. Can make an entire galaxy's worth of moving matter stop dead. Time travel. Flawless, instinctive travel to any point in any timeline. Can exist in multiple time periods at once. Deadpool's abilities, regenerative healing factor, true immortality. Cannot be killed by any known means, including conceptual erasure. Enhanced reflexes, can dodge teleportation. Moves before the thought to attack him has even formed in an opponent's mind. Pain suppression, does not register pain as a concept. Can operate at 100% capacity regardless of physical state. Combat skills, a living weapon. Mastery of combat is so profound he can defeat gods in martial arts alone. Advanced abilities, electrokinetic control, can summon and control lightning on a stellar scale. Generate electrical storms that can power or black out entire civilizations. Enhanced kinetic absorption, can absorb the kinetic energy of a planet's rotation, stopping the world without causing a cataclysm. Dimensional awareness, sees the multiverse as a tangible, interconnected web. Can feel a dimensional rift forming in a universe a trillion realities away. Chronostabilizer, creates a permanent, safe zone around himself where time cannot be manipulated by others. Energy redirection, can catch a universe-ending blast and redirect it safely into the void between dimensions. It was staggering. He wasn't just fast anymore. He was a fundamental force, given conscious thought. The new abilities he'd gained earlier had also integrated deeply. Electrokinetic control wasn't just lightning anymore, it was shaping raw speed force energy into solid constructs. Dimensional awareness was now a constant, low-grade sense, like knowing which way was north. But his eyes kept drifting to the bottom of the display. A new tab was now active, pulsating with a soft, golden light. It had appeared the moment he'd hit level 10, a distraction he'd forcefully shoved aside to deal with Zoom. Dungeon Module. Unlocked a simulated reality interface for training and resource acquisition. Environments are extrapolated from the user's memories, knowledge, and latent fears. Rewards are commensurate with the challenge. Entry is at the user's discretion. Warning, physical and mental strain are real. Failure has consequences. Initiate Y/N. A dungeon. His own personal, hyper-advanced training simulator. The scientist in him was fascinated. The hero was cautious. The part of him that was still just Barry was a little terrified. He had to know. He looked around the empty lab. This was the place. No one would disturb him here. Initiate, he whispered. The world didn't dissolve. Instead, a single point of light appeared in the center of the room, no larger than a marble. It hovered, spinning silently. Then, it expanded. It wasn't a violent explosion. It was an unfolding. The air itself seemed to peel back, reality curling at the edges to reveal a swirling vortex of iridescent energy. It was silent, absorbing all sound from the lab. Through the portal, he could see a distorted, alien landscape, jagged, dark crystals thrusting towards a blood-red sky, with faint, ghostly lightning flickering in the distance. A wave of palpable energy washed over him, carrying a scent of ozone and ancient dust. It was challenging him. Daring him to step forward. Barry's heart hammered against his ribs. This wasn't a VR simulation. This was real. A pocket dimension, or something even stranger, created just for him. He took a step forward, then another. The humming of the lab's generators faded, replaced by the absolute silence of the vortex. He stood at the threshold, the energy making the hairs on his arms stand up. This was it. A new frontier. Not to fight a villain or save the city, but to explore the absolute limits of what he had become. He glanced one last time at the familiar surroundings of his lab, a final anchor to his old world. Then, he solidified his resolve. "All right," he said to the void. "Let's see what you've got." He stepped through. The transition was instantaneous. There was no sensation of movement. One moment he was in the speed lab, the next, he was standing on an obsidian plane under that oppressive red sky. The portal winked out behind him, leaving no trace. The air was thick and heavy, gravity feeling slightly stronger than on Earth. In the distance, one of the massive crystals shifted, its tip turning towards him like a predator sensing prey. A new, simpler interface appeared in the corner of his vision. Dungeon instance, the crystalline labyrinth objective, survive. Reach the core. Reward, 500 XP, 1000 credits, unknown item. Barry cracked his neck, a spark of gold lightning dancing across his knuckles. A fierce, focused grin replaced his earlier apprehension. He was no longer just Barry Allen, the Flash. He was a level 12 force of nature, and he was ready to train. The air in the crystalline labyrinth was dead. No wind, no scent, just a dry, static charge that clung to the back of his throat. Under a sky the color of a fresh bruise, Barry stood on a plane of polished black obsidian. Before him stretched a forest of jagged, purple crystals, each one taller than a skyscraper, forming a maze of impossible scale. A simple, glowing objective hovered in his vision: reach the core. He didn't run. He took a single, casual step. The world blurred into a streak of gold and scarlet. The labyrinth, designed to disorient and trap, was rendered meaningless. He didn't follow the paths. He phased through crystal walls, ran across vertical surfaces, and treated the deadly, complex maze like a straight line. Alarms shrieked through the psychic atmosphere. From the facets of the crystals, guardians emerged. They were humanoid shapes of solid light, armed with shimmering blades. They moved fast, faster than any human, faster than most metas. To Barry, they were statues. He didn't even throw a punch. He just ran past them. The wake of his passage, a vacuum of displaced air and raw speed force energy, shattered them into a million glittering motes of light. They didn't have time to register his presence before they ceased to exist. Level 1 clear. Reward, 10 XP, 20 credits. Level 2 clear. Reward, 10 XP, 20 credits. The notifications flickered in the corner of his mind, trivial and barely noticed. He was a force of nature moving through a model town. He didn't fight the environment, he commanded it. When a massive crystal spike shot from the ground, he didn't dodge. He vibrated his hand and touched it, and the entire structure dissolved into harmless sand. Level 10 clear. Reward, 15 XP, 30 credits. Total bonus, 100 XP, 200 credits. The labyrinth shifted. The crystals turned a venomous green, and the guardians now fired beams of corrosive energy. It changed nothing. He ran through the beams, the energy harmlessly absorbed by him. He blew past level 20, then 30, the rewards ticking up slightly with each milestone, the challenges crumbling before his absolute speed. He wasn't even breathing hard. This wasn't a test of his power, it was a test of his control. And he was in perfect control. At level 40, the world transformed again. The maze vanished, replaced by a vast, circular arena suspended in a starless void. A colossal golem, assembled from the shattered remains of the previous guardians, rose before him. It was 100 feet tall, a titan of concentrated light, its roar a silent wave of pressure that would have liquefied a normal human. Barry stopped running. He stood in the center of the arena, looking up at the behemoth. It swung a fist the size of a bus, moving at hypersonic speeds. Barry didn't move from the spot. He simply raised his open palm. The Titan's fist connected with a cataclysmic boom that shook the void. Energy flared, blinding and violent. When it cleared, Barry was still standing there, his hand raised. The Titan's fist had stopped dead against his palm, without him moving an inch. Not a crack appeared on the ground beneath his feet. He had absorbed all the kinetic energy, every ounce of that world-shattering force. He looked up at the stunned golem. "My turn," he said. He didn't draw back his arm. He just pushed. The same kinetic energy he had absorbed, amplified by his own strength, shot back through the Titan's arm. The effect was instantaneous. Cracks of golden light spiderwebbed from the point of impact, racing across the giant's body. It froze, a look of what might have been shock on its featureless face, and then detonated from the inside out, filling the void with a silent, beautiful firework of dissolving light. Level 50 clear. Reward, 500 XP, 1000 credits. Milestone bonus, 2500 XP, 5000 credits. The arena dissolved, and he was back in the obsidian plane, standing before a massive, pulsating core of pure white energy, the heart of the labyrinth. It was over. A final, comprehensive notification scrolled before his eyes. Dungeon segment complete, levels 1 to 50. Total experience gained, 5850 XP. Total credits gained, 11,700 C. Level up. User, Bartholomew Barry Allen. Level, 13 experience, 1130/1600 health, 100% energy signature, optimal credits, 17,400 rewards consolidated. No ability or skill upgrades awarded at this time. Proceed to the next segment. Y/N. Barry let out a slow breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He felt fine. A little energized, maybe. Like he'd just finished a light warm-up. He had gained a level and a small fortune in this system's currency, all in what felt like 10 minutes. He looked at the pulsing core. This was just the first segment. The easy part. The system was adaptive. It had thrown a planet killer at him at level 40, and he had swatted it aside without effort. What would it throw at him next? A part of him, the part that was still a scientist, was wildly curious. What were the limits of this simulation? What kind of challenges could it possibly create that would actually challenge him now? But the larger part, the hero who had just finished a multiversal war, knew better. This was a tool, not a game. Pushing further now, alone, without anyone even knowing where he was, that was how mistakes happened. Catastrophic ones. He had the data. He understood the basic mechanics. He had gained significant resources. System, he said aloud. Exit dungeon. The world didn't swirl or fade. It simply ceased to be. One moment he was on the obsidian plane, the next he was back in the speed lab, standing in the exact same spot. The familiar hum of the generators and the smell of ozone and metal filled his senses. The portal was gone. He glanced at the chronometer on the wall. Only 7 minutes had passed. He leaned against the console, a wry smile on his face. He had just cleared 50 levels of an extra-dimensional challenge, gained a level and over 10,000 credits, and he wasn't even late for breakfast. The power at his fingertips was staggering. But as he looked at his hands, all he could think was that he needed to be smarter and more careful than ever before. The dungeon would be there tomorrow. For now, it was enough to know it existed. He took one last look around the empty lab, then flashed upstairs. The world was safe, and for the first time, he felt truly ready to protect it, no matter what came next.
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.